Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 45 of the Former Action Guys podcast, and I'm your host, Justin Kramer. This week I have on the episode, or on the show, Levi Slife and Quentin Brown. They have both been guests before. Levi was on episode 14, and Brown was on episode 18. They both were JTACs in the Marine Corps, and both of them got out and now are firefighters. Levi is a federal firefighter, and Quentin works for three different, actually, fire agencies in Ohio. So this episode focuses a little bit of military stuff at the beginning, but then we roll right into fire department stuff, and it's a really good episode for anyone that's thinking about getting out of the military and going to become a firefighter, or you're just thinking about being a firefighter in general. We go through some of the hiring process on the federal side and the local side for like Ohio, which is kind of a general, will hopefully give you some general information for agencies across the country. And then we talk about some of the different calls they've gone on and the issues that they've had. And at the kind of towards the end, we talk just a little bit about a coronavirus and how it's affected them. And because I didn't want to go too crazy about it, I know everybody's getting tired of hearing about it. So I just wanted to make sure we touched on it a little bit. But that's what we got going on today. Yeah. And hey, I hit 20,000, over 20,000 downloads. I don't know if I mentioned on the last podcast. So thanks to everyone that's been downloading and who have subscribed to me on either YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts, stuff like that. Please, if you have the opportunity, like on Apple Podcasts or YouTube, leave a comment or leave a review. I love to see that. I'm going to start reading those off and stuff again. I'm also going to be starting my website specifically for this page, formeractionguys.com. I just have to build it up now. I've already got the domain and everything like that, but eventually I'm going to have a dedicated website for just this podcast. So, but anyway, if you're not watching this video, then make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel, Former Action Guys Podcast. Make sure you give a like and leave comments on your favorite episodes. Yeah, and make sure to check out my website, jkramergraphics.com, and my Instagram page at jkramergraphics, which just hit 10,000 followers. So thank you for that, for those that are out there. Again, that's jkramergraphics.com and at jkramergraphics on Instagram. So enjoy the episode. All right. Well, let's kick this pig. Welcome back to the show, both of you guys. So today, who do we got? We got Levi Slife and we got Quentin Brown on. And you guys were both on previously. I'm looking up the numbers right now, which episodes, unless you know it offhand. But you guys were both on here previously. So if you haven't seen either one of these, the people that are watching, if you haven't seen either one of these, Levi was on episode 14. And then Quentin was on 18. So go back and listen to those episodes, and that gives a really detailed version of their careers in the Marine Corps. But I know some people aren't going to go back and listen to those, and I know some people just started watching this podcast when it came up on YouTube. So if you could, starting with, I guess, Levi, since you're on my left here, if you want to go ahead and give like a quick synopsis of your time in the Marine Corps, like when you joined, the different units you were with, and the different positions you held, and then what you do now, and then we'll jump over to Quentin and go from there.
Yeah, so again, I'm Levi Slife. I was a 0861 fire support man in the Marine Corps. I joined in 2007. I got out in 2015. I made my way up to be a JFO and then a JTAC. I did a couple of 31st MUs. Both as a JFO and a JTAC, and then I went to Afghanistan once as a JFO and twice as a JTAC. And that I spent all my time with the 11th Marine Regiment, the good big Blue Diamond, 1st Mar Div, and then I got out, did some contracting for a little bit. And sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, real quick. What parts of Afghanistan were you in?
I was at RC Southwest the whole time. I was with 2-1 down in Garmsir. I was with 2-5 in Musakela. Actually, me and Quentin both were there together in Musakela, Kajaki area. And then my third time there, I worked for an advisor team on Camp Leatherneck. Okay.
And then what do you do now?
Right now, I am a federal firefighter on Fort Sill.
Okay. And then Quentin, if you want to go ahead and give us your rundown.
So Quentin Brown got out as a staff sergeant, Paris Island grad.
Paris Island grad.
5th Anglico in Okinawa, Japan, Iraq once. Let's see. Then I went to 11th Marines, to 511. Then went to TACP school at PAC. Went to 3rd LAR, deployed to Afghanistan with them. Then came back, went to 2-5, Retreat Hill with Levi, deployed to Afghan with him. And then came back, went to MARSOC, first MSOSB and then first MSOB, and we deployed to Guam, and then shortly thereafter I got out. So,
all right. So when you guys were both together, did you guys go to Garmshire together, or were you guys in Musa Kala together?
We were in Musa Kala together.
Okay. So I never made it up to Musa Kala. I heard it's a really shitty spot, though. What years were you guys there, or what year were you guys there?
Yeah, you didn't miss much. We were there in 2012.
Okay. Yeah. So that was in between. That was in between my deployments too, and that would have been. So did you guys replace 3-2?
No, we replaced 2-4.
Okay. Because I remember, I don't know if you knew. Well, you guys were West Coast guys. 3-2 was out there in 2010, 2011, and that's when the whole sniper thing was going on. They were smoking all kinds of dudes with their snipers, and then the whole pissing on the bodies thing happened and kind of tarnished their achievements, I guess. I think to combat Marines, and you guys can expand on this if you want. I don't think it really tarnished it in our eyes. But for the general public, obviously it was something that wasn't good for them to see. That, I guess it's just opening people's eyes to how shitty combat is and how like people deal with like the stresses of being over there. Was the Musa Kala, they had some pretty good. So they had their fighters there were pretty good about using like actual tactics rather than just hit and run, right? Or did you guys experience that at all, Quentin?
Yeah, I mean their tactics were pretty decent. I think the one thing that surprised me the most was we were actually at the Kajaki Dam and they used an airburst mortar on us, and I mean thank God
no way.
Yeah, they were close enough to kind of give you the heebie-jeebies there, but far away enough to where we weren't freaking out too much about it, but it was definitely one of those things like, okay, we should probably move. So
yeah, I took IDF when I was in Iraq. That was like the only like real anything that happened while I was there because I was on TQ the whole time. And then my second deployment to Afghanistan, when we flew into Leatherneck, actually we were there for like an hour. We had just gotten there. They're like, hey, here's your transient tent you're gonna sleep in, and everyone's getting ready to go get chow because we've been traveling, now we want to go get some food. And we started taking incoming there. I think those were rockets, though, not mortars. But it's weird, like the first time. So in Iraq, the first time that we got mortared, I was like, oh, shit. You're like super like, oh, crap, like this is crazy, And then after a while, you get kind of used to it. And I remember when Leatherneck got rocketed while we were there, one of the lieutenants was like, oh crap, like, this is happening. Should we go to the bunker? And I'm like, dude, that's on the other side of the base. Like we're still going to walk to chow. Like this will be over in just a minute. Like the alarms are going off, but it'll be over in just a minute. But it's just funny how you kind of get used to, shitty stuff like that. I don't know. How did you,
2013, spring of 13, was it?
Yeah, it was actually. I got there in March or April of 13.
Yeah, it would have been April of 13 because I was on the advisor team there. And I remember I woke up and I had to pee, and I heard the alarms, and I was like, "Oh man, I can't go outside now. Then they're gonna make me get in a bunker. I won't be able to go pee." And I'm looking around my little shoe that I live in there, my little housing, my shipping container turned into a housing unit. And of course, being the good Marine that I was, I'd taken all my trash out, so I had no empty bottles or anything. And I remember just sitting there, just miserable, trying to wait it out. And then eventually somebody came through the door open. It's like, yeah, to get in the bunker. And so I had to stand in the bunker with all the CBs. And there's, probably half a dozen to a dozen females there because I was going to just go pee in the corner. But nope, can't do that. And so
can't do that.
It was probably the longest 45 minutes of my adult life,
Oh, yeah. We didn't get in the bunker. We were just over. No, when you're in the transient tents, nobody cares about you over there. It's up to you to do your own thing. It was funny though. Well, it wasn't really. It's interesting. I had a lieutenant that hadn't deployed yet. This was his first deployment. And when we landed on the tarmac in Leatherneck, we were coming off the bird and we were walking, and there was like multiple medevac helicopters took off, probably like 4 or 5. And I was like, oh shit, that's not good. And he saw it and he's like, well, maybe they're just training. And I'm like, bro, we're in Afghanistan. Like the training's done. Like this is for real, you know? And then an hour later, then we started getting the rocket attack and stuff. So luckily for me, man, that wasn't, 2 things I never had to experience like in depth was IDF attacks. Like none of it was consistent or happening a lot, or grenade attacks. I've heard some areas had real issues with grenade attacks. Did you guys experience that at all up in Municipal when you were working together?
I'll let you take that one first there, Q.
I don't remember hearing about grenade attacks, but they took a pretty heavy V-bid at Municipal, if I'm remembering correctly. I think it was
V-bid and suicide vest.
Yeah, suicide vest, and then I want to say there was some small arms fire, but it wasn't like an overwhelming type thing.
I never got the suicide vest. Like the people that we had when I was in Marja, I think within the first 24 hours that I was there, we had a guy try to detonate a suicide vest, and Afghan soldier shot him. And his vest actually malfunctioned when he tried to detonate it, and he ended up burning himself to death, you know? So that's cool. But I don't get that mentality, man. I don't think I could. You think you could find a Marine, like if we used tactics like that? You think there's dudes that you knew in the Marine Corps that'd be like, yeah, I'd put on the suicide vest. I'd do it for my country.
So I actually have a theory about that. And now I'll just go ahead for everybody listening. I'll let you know that when you hear me call Quentin, when you hear me call him Skid Mark, that was his call sign for the longest time. That's what I called him for years. That's what he saved in my phone as. So bear with me, Ed. It's not me being mean. That was somebody else being mean to him. But
keeping it going.
Yeah, right, dude. I'm telling you. But I have a theory about that, and my theory is that when you live in just a really, really bad part of the world, just you live in a shithole, and you have nothing going for your life, really. I mean, these guys, I'm sure it was the same up in Marja, but down in Garms here, these guys didn't know how old they were. They're like, I think I'm 40 years old, because it didn't matter.
Yeah.
They just went out, worked the field, came home, made dinner, and did the same thing the next day. So I have a theory about that you don't really find people that are willing to do that in the really, like, there's nobody from, the really nice parts of Saudi Arabia or Oman or whatever that are willing to do that. And you couple that with this extreme religion that from the day you're born, everything around you is the religion. It's not like here in America where, I mean, we got Jedi as a religion. We got everything under the sun. You can worship, the lizard people to Buddha to Allah to God. It doesn't matter. But I think when you're indoctrinated in it and you couple that with just a really crappy place to be, I think that's really what drives them, because we found out with 2.5 doing ops down there that a lot of those guys valued their life a lot more than we kind of give them credit for. They didn't want to come shoot at us a whole lot. They didn't want to shoot at the tanks because they kept saying, well, no, they'll kill us. Don't shoot the tanks will kill you. And they were, we listened to them over ICOM. The leaders were getting frustrated with their fighters because the fighters didn't want to go fight the tanks because the tanks would kill them. So
you guys were using tanks out there?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like pretty, like actually using them, or were they mostly for Overwatch?
So I can speak for Golf Company. We would go out and do helo raids, and the tanks would meet us out there with our mobile section, which was just our cat team. And we used the tanks to put holes in walls. We used the tanks to basically clear lanes for us. We just have the tank drive through the field, and we'd walk in the tracks behind it and sweep for IDs. Fun fact, I ran a Kazvac 9 line or a medevac, excuse me. We had a medevac come in. I landed the aircraft, and then on the same frequency, one of the other facts that was in one of the tanks ran a CAS 9 line with the Cobras that were providing escort for the dust-off bird because they were getting RPG shot at them. We did that all while I'm bringing the aircraft out of the zone, and this dude is on the same frequency talking to the escorts, putting a hellfire into a building. So, yeah.
How confusing was that to talk on the? You guys were both using the same net?
Well, yeah. So the very, very short version of what happened was it was a very very dangerous area, and we had a dude, his appendix ruptured, of all things, right? So we popped like 3 different colors of smoke, and to try and confuse them, I had the Cobras doing suppressing fires in front of this village where we knew that there was we'd been taking contact from there all day, and as the helicopters are leaving, we see a couple little black puffs behind the tail rotor, which it's not at all like the movies. I'd never seen a RPG shot at a helicopter before, but it's not like the movies where you get a nice white smoke trail. It's just, if I hadn't been looking, I wouldn't have seen it, But the helicopter's taking off, and I see it, so I'm telling them, hey, dust off, you're taking RPG fire for 7 o'clock. They start moving, and the Cobras said, hey, where's it come from? And I told them, I don't know. I need you to start scanning around. And the FAC with the tanks pops on my CASEVAC frequency and goes, hey, we have PID on the shooter. He's reloading. We can't range him with the tank right now. Or there's a reason the tank couldn't shoot him. I don't know what it was. I just said, hey, dust off, continue, break in as need be. But Driftwood, whatever his call sign was, has brief stack mark control at this time. And then he just ran the attack with the Cobras on the medevac frequency and passed him back over to me, and everybody went on their merry way.
That's sick because the tanks actually have their sighting system is really good, and the accuracy of their grids that they can pull, their target location data is like super accurate. Even though I don't think it's like certified to be like as accurate as some of our targeting programs and stuff like that, but it's really accurate. So that's actually not a bad platform to be passing grids or getting your target location data from. Did you guys use the tanks out, and what company were you with?
So I was with Echo Company, and fun fact, actually, so I work for the Cleveland Fire Department, and one of our Cleveland firefighters was with First Tanks, the guys that supported Levi's company. Oh, so just a little fun piece of intel there.
Small world.
Right. And so we didn't actually use tanks like Golf Company used tanks. We more so worked with them during the one time during the Kajaki Dam operations when I think it was both Echo and Golf Company during those ops. And I mean, the tanks were side by side with us. I mean, I remember. We would actually our like mobile section was doing kind of almost patrols with the tanks, and then the tanks would kind of flex to go support the different platoons that were getting into it. So
yeah. So I'm not sure how much you guys keep up with the news. I'm sure you're fully aware though. But starting with you, Q, what do you think about the Marine Corps deciding to pull tanks from one of our assets?
How do I politely say this?
You don't have to be polite.
I think it's not the best of ideas, and it's literally just making the Marine Corps less lethal. I mean, that's all it's doing. I
think some of the justification that people are using is that they're trying to thin out the Marine Corps. They're trying to make it a smaller, more lethal force that's more agile. And I think that the thinking is, how are you realistically going to use tanks if you're fighting like China in the Pacific on all these different islands? Like, is that something you're actually going to do? And I mean, I guess you have people that'll argue both ways, that it's good and bad. I personally have never used tanks. We had tanks come out and they would sit up on I don't remember the name of the hilltop in Sangin. There was over on the hilltop in Sangin. What was it called? I don't remember. Anyway, they would sit over there on Overwatch basically and just use their sights to see if they can find anything. But I never really had any one-on-one or any kind of like hands-on experience with them. So I can kind of see where they're coming from, where they want to get rid of them, because it seems like we're maintaining an asset that we're not utilizing. But I also see the argument that it's a short-sighted decision, that we're thinking about what's happening right now and what's not what's going to happen in like 20 or 30 years from now. So,
I mean,
what do you think about that, Levi? Huh?
Go ahead.
Well, I think there's kind of two schools of thoughts with it. You're absolutely right on both sides of that. I mean, the Marine Corps was originally built to be expeditionary. You look back to some of our pubs. We had the Small Wars Manual. The Marine Corps was meant to just fight the Banana Wars, the Boxer Rebellion. The small little, hey, let's go in there. Let's kick their hornet's nest a little bit. Let's put some people in their place, and then we'll leave and be gone. But I think with the global war on terror, we've become the Army light, if that makes sense, where we're an occupying force that's sitting there, and tanks really do have a role there. Again, I was one of those guys always, thought the tankers were kind of goofy, like, they're more pogue than I am, sort of thing, until we started using them, and I saw the capability that they bring. I mean, you watch a tank hit 4 IEDs in one day and nothing happens, and then it takes a direct hit from an RPG and nothing happens. It's pretty cool to see. But at the same time, if the Marine Corps is trying to get back to being expeditionary and getting out of this, Army light mindset, tanks, you can't fit a whole lot of tanks on a boat, and even if you can, how you get into shore, you got the LCAC, and at that point, we're really not expeditionary with them. So I could go either way on it. I think it's a rash decision to just cut them completely, but I could be okay with downsizing, because I will say it. I'm not trying to be polite. I work on an Army installation. I see the Army daily. I went to the JTACs symposium where all the NATO countries are there. The Army sucks. The Army is good at like a few things, and their soft community is awesome. The Rangers are good, but their everyday units. I mean, it's a crapshoot on whether you're gonna roll the snake eyes or whether you're gonna roll 7s and 11s. It really is. So and
you're not biased at all either,
Well, so I went up to NTC, which is, the Army's version of the 29 Palms, CACs, whatever. I went up there as a guest OCT, so basically a guest evaluator for the Air Force JTACs twice. And what I saw from the units that were there was less than impressive. The one example I'll give, and then I'll shut up. I watched an entire striker, it was an armor unit that was out there. I watched an entire striker company get killed by 2 BMPs in a ZSU.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like because they were all oriented to the east, and the BMP and the ZSU came from the west, and they couldn't figure out why all their miles gear was going off, and nobody thought to look behind them and look at these 2 or 3 Russian vehicles just sitting there.
And they're just sitting there getting smoked from behind. I worked with the
things like that. Just kind of, Anyway,
I know what you're saying. I worked with the 501st at JRTC down in Fort Polk, and they were. I won't say that they were. I was surprised by some of the skills that they didn't have. Like, I had my comm chief. I was like, "Hey man, while we're in Louisiana, you're gonna set up a field expedient antenna, and I want you to shoot an unamplified, message back to Camp Pendleton, and we'll have our guys on that side of it do radio checks. That way we can, 1, get in contact with command, and 2, exercise our capabilities, and work on our HF stuff." And we were setting this antenna up, and these soldiers came over, and it was just like blowing their mind. They're like, "What are you guys doing?" We're like, "Oh, we're building an antenna to shoot back an unamplified radio call back to California." And they're just like, "What?" And I was like, "You know what? Hey guys, we're out here, and my guys are all fully capable. So if you guys want to learn about this, come tomorrow, and we'll give you guys a class." And dude, the next day, 40 people showed up, 40 guys all rolled in. Were and good on them. And I'm glad that they took interest in it. I was just really surprised by,
to
exactly,
teach each other skills that we may or may not have.
Yeah, all my guys because I was with 1st Anglico at the time. My guys got assigned to their recce units and their sniper units and stuff like that, and they were blown away by us having the tablets, and doing target stuff with that and planning with the tablets. And I don't know, it was just kind of interesting working with the Army, because I've never really, I guess that was the closest I've ever worked hand in hand with them. We were always adjacent to them rather than being embedded with them. So, did you guys ever work with them in Afghanistan?
We had PsyOps guys from the Army with us.
Yeah.
But that was the closest, that between that and the medevac, that's the closest I've ever been working with the Army in country.
Okay. What about you, Q? Did you ever work with the Army?
So yeah, we worked with actually a striker brigade when I was in 5th Anglico. We were at NTC there, and again, my experience was very similar to Levi's. They actually took a lot of casualties in training, actual real world casualties. Basically, they were running into each other. One guy got taken out by the drop door. It hit him and messed him up pretty good. Just crazy stuff that they were doing. We worked with some psyops when I was in Iraq at Al Qaim with a military transition team. But yeah, that was it. And the soldiers we had with us in Iraq, those dudes were solid, real good dudes. The Stryker Brigade when I was at NTC, not so much. So, but dust off, they were fantastic. Never had a problem with them. They flew real well for us. So.
For sure. Did you do a lot of, when you were over at Raider Battalion, did you do a lot of joint training there?
Not really. I'm trying to think now. Some units they did some joint stuff when we were in Guam. Actually, we actually did. Some of the guys did a little, I guess, meet and greet with Chinese soldiers or something like that. It was really weird. Yeah. The only reason I remember that is because the guys were coming into where we had our little armory at Guam, and they're like, all right, strip your weapons of all optics, of all gear, just bare bones out there. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure they know what we have.
They know our optics.
So, but it was just a weird thing. But yeah, we didn't do a whole lot of joint stuff when I was with MARSOC. We actually did more joint stuff when I was with 5th Anglico, surprisingly. So,
okay. I remember on my first MEU as we were going out to Hawaii, there was some kind of exercise going on that a lot of Pacific nations were partnered, that were coming in to do. And I think we invited the Chinese to participate. And then they came in and was trying to gather intel the whole time. So they basically kicked them out or something. It was something along those lines. I don't remember the specifics of it, but it was like one of those like, geez, guys, like we're trying to, extend a hand of like, hey, we don't want to all be, we don't want it to be like the Cold War, and then you guys come in and try to spy, like you're using electronic surveillance and stuff like that. Like, get the hell out of here. That's
good times.
Pretty interesting stuff. So let's, when did you guys meet? Did you guys meet when you went to 5th Marines, or were you guys in like 11th Marines together?
You go ahead and take that one, Q.
So we actually met right before we all went to 2-5. Let's see. I'm trying to remember the circle. Okay, so we're actually kind of all doing I was teaching the JTAC primer at 1st Marine Division FSCC, and Levi, you'll have to remind me. Were you coming through as I was teaching, or had you already?
I had just come out of TACP school.
Okay, so he had just
brand new, still wet behind the ears.
So you brought him under your wing. You're like, come here, let me teach you the way.
Yes, don't let him be humble about it. He taught me a lot of stuff.
So it was actually him and DeFlito. We all got assigned to 2-5. I was actually supposed to go with, I want to say, MLG. I was supposed to go with, but somebody ended up kind of screwing the pooch, and Top Cabral took him out of the 2-5 deployment and replaced me on that one. So then we all went to 2-5 together, did a lot of training there together, because for a little while it seemed as though they didn't really know what to do with us, and they hadn't assigned us to companies yet. So it's kind of a roll of the dice who was going to go where. So we got to do a lot of training, just kind of the three of us. The air officer set up some training just for us, which was really cool. And then we got assigned to the companies, and so we've known each other since, I think that was,
it was 11.
Was it 11? So it was the 11 right before.
November of 11 is when we went over there, because we were with 2-5 when I got arrested by San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department for not passing a police car at 2:00 in the morning.
For not passing him?
Yeah, super long story short, I was coming back from Vegas because my now wife lived up there, and I went up there for Thanksgiving to have Thanksgiving with her. And I was coming back, and I was taking a side highway to avoid all the traffic on Interstate 15, and I was doing like 90 miles an hour down this highway, and I hit a stop sign and turned to another highway, and I was like coming into a town, so I slowed down, and a sheriff car pulled out in front of me. It's like 2:00 in the morning, and they were only doing like 35 miles an hour, and I gained on pretty quick at 50, so I slowed down and just paced behind them. They pulled off the road, flipped around, and lit me up, and they told me that it was suspicious I wouldn't pass their police car. I got put in handcuffs for having all my gear and everything in the back. We were going to Mojave Viper that Monday morning. I was on my way to Pendleton for that. So, yeah.
Did you actually receive any charges for that, or were you just being harassed?
No, they were fishing. They were looking for stuff. They rifled through my truck, went through all my gear. Dude gave me a whole spiel about how the speed limit on any state highway in America is 55 miles an hour, and I should know that. And dude, it's just me in handcuffs on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere with two guys. I'm not going to argue with them, even though we all know that's not correct.
Yeah, that's fucked up. No, but you're right though. It's easier just to, like, if you understand the situation, it's easier just to get through it and then deal with it on the back end if you need to. But that's, man, fucking harassment.
I think if
I'm all about police. I'll put it out there.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I'm pro police and stuff like that. I think that we need police officers and stuff like that. But you hear situations like that, and it's more understanding when people have a bad taste in their mouth about dealing with police officers when they go through something like that.
Well, and if you remember a couple of years back, San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department, they had a lot of issues. They got a real big black eye. There was a guy, I guess he was on house arrest or something for having cooked meth, and cops went and knocked on his door to see if he knew something about someone else. Well, he was cooking meth in the trailer, so he took out the back door, stole a car, drove down, jumped a fence, stole somebody's horse, and took off into the desert. And the cops were chasing him on foot. There was a helicopter following him. Unbeknownst to the guys on the ground, there was also a news helicopter watching the whole thing. Guy gets bucked off the horse. He, spreads out, goes down on the ground. The cops just come. And I mean, one guy just like, hey, 67-yard field goal, kick this dude right in the face. They're kicking him in the nuts. They're, punching him. They got him handcuffed and all. As more cops show up, it's like something out of The Simpsons. They're just beating the crap out of this guy. And so after that, they kind of toned down quite a bit because they got put in the limelight over that.
Now you're a federal. You work for the federal fire department, and BQ, you work for an actual city or that kind of locality. So you probably deal with the police a lot more, don't you, when you go out on calls?
Yeah. But just real quick, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
Some legalese just to cover my butt. I just want everybody to understand I am speaking for myself and not in an official capacity for any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, or individuals. My statements reflect my personal opinions. Any views, opinions, or beliefs shared are not intended to malign the aforementioned entities. Now
did someone write that for you, or did you write that?
I wrote that like a boss.
Nice. It's very legal.
So yeah, I work for 3 different municipalities: the Cleveland Fire Department full-time, Copley Fire Department part-time, and Medina Fire Department part-time. So,
how is for you guys both? First, Levi, for federal fire department, are you doing mostly fires, or how often are you going out for medical stuff?
So it's interesting because I'm a GS employee, and being I'll go ahead and start now. We are not nearly as busy as Skidmark is with his stuff because our target population lives on Fort Sill. They're generally healthy, relatively disciplined young people. And all the buildings are maintained by the federal government who, will throw money at them for no reason whatsoever. So we don't do a whole lot of structure fires. The last one we had, actually, the Burger King on Fort Sill, their grease trap in their vent hood caught on fire. And it was just a quick little spurt with the fire extinguisher, put it out. It's not to say we don't have structure fires in the housing, but it's far and few between because we have relatively responsible people living there. Where we really make our money is range fires because, it's windy in Oklahoma, it's flat, there's a lot of grass, and it gets hot. So we have range fires. We're coming up here now that it's getting to be fire season. We'll probably have 2 to 3 fires a day all the way up until September, October timeframe when it starts to get cold and rainy and stuff again. We do run a decent amount of medicals. But and again, like you said, my opinions don't represent Forts of Fire; they represent his. So no, I'm just kidding. But we the station I'm at, we have the Reynolds Army Hospital, which I don't know if you remember from coming through Masoc, but it's that big hospital they have that is actually not a hospital; it's a clinic. It was a hospital at one point in time, but now it's an outpatient clinic, and there's a VA clinic there as well. So my station makes a lot of medical runs because anytime somebody has chest pain, shortness of breath, anything that could potentially be life-threatening but isn't currently, they send fire with the ambulance, which is also based out of the hospital, ironically enough, to go look at that. So we make a lot of medical runs that aren't really real, if that makes sense. I mean, a lot of the time,
they're precautionary.
It's right. A lot of the time, it's at the VA clinic, they've got a Korea or a Vietnam vet who's got he's got emphysema and he's on heart medication and this, that, or the other, and his EKG looked a little funny, so his heart, something's wrong with his heart, and they need to get him to the hospital. And he showed up because he has chest pain and shortness of breath. Well, because he could be having a heart attack, they send the fire department and the ambulance. So we just kind of show up and hang out with him until the ambulance gets to make sure he doesn't get any worse. But every now and then we do run legit medicals. We've had pretty bad car accidents that we've worked. That's probably the most frequent, car accidents, and then kids in AIT out there that are ODing on drugs, whether it be prescription.
What?
Yeah. So
really, that's an issue?
Oh yeah, we ran one, and without getting violating HIPAA at all, we ran one call at night where we had a kid who had eaten a whole bottle of basically muscle relaxers, and he was, this dude, he was zonked, man. And so we get him, me and my partner get him loaded onto the gurney for the ambulance, and I'm looking like, where's my crew chief? Where'd he go? And one of the soldiers goes, oh, they're up with the second patient. That's like, second patient? We go up two decks, and sure enough, there's a dude who did the exact same thing. And so we had to get a second ambulance out there. Yeah, it was just ridiculous. So we run into those, but that's nothing major like he's running into, because again, our population is generally healthy and well disciplined.
Yeah. Did either, starting with Q, did either one of you guys consider going to become like a wildland firefighter?
So I'll be 100% honest. In that respect, Levi is my hero because wildland fire scares the hell out of me. Just because for me, being in a structure fire, I can just run out of the building or get out of the building somehow, generally speaking, and I'm out of danger for the most part. You ain't gonna outrun a wildland fire. You're just not.
Yeah.
I mean, the wind moves too rapidly. Those things get super hot. Not that a structure fire doesn't get really hot. But I mean, I considered it for like 2 minutes after watching, what was it, that Only the Brave? And I was
Only the Brave.
Yeah, nah, not for me.
I don't think I've ever seen that. Is that a movie?
Yeah, it's
a very good movie. If you don't mind, you all speak. This is it's near to my heart with this, because I do a lot of outside fires. It's basically it was in 2012, 2010, I believe. There was a municipality that was the first ever interagency hotshot crew, which the hotshots are like the equivalent of what we would call Rangers in the Army model of wildland firefighters, and then the soft dudes would be like the smoke jumpers. And you have to be a hotshot for so long before you can become a smoke jumper. But the hotshots are they're king when it comes to wildland firefighting for the Forestry Service. And a municipality in Arizona they got certified as a hotshot crew, and they ended up getting the Yarnell Hill fire out there in Arizona is a really bad fire. And they, for one reason or another, nobody knows because nobody can ask them why they did what they did. But 19 of the 20 of them, their lookout was the only one who survived. They ended up in front of the fire and outside of their safety zone, and they got burned up real bad. And just to put it in perspective, they were in their fire shelters, and the fire shelter is basically like an aluminum foil sleeping bag looking thing. that you put over you and lay with your feet to the fire. Well, it's rated to. It itself is rated to withstand 700 degrees. You won't survive 700 degrees inside there, but the shelter itself is rated at 700 degrees, and all the shelters were completely burned up. And all their tools are burned up and stuff. So that was like the single largest loss the fire service has had in a very long time. And so it's a big learning point for us. That's something that we reference a lot with our safety on the fire line when we're outside.
I actually remember when that happened.
Yeah.
I didn't know they had made a movie about it, but I remember when that happened. They said like the spotter was like the junior guy, so he was up on the hill and like the wind shifted or something, and it just, it's one of those things. So when you deploy your shelter, and I remember them saying they're like when they heard the radio call that they were deploying their shelters, that they're like, oh fuck, like this is not good,
Yeah.
Is the hope that the fire is just quickly moving and it's just going to pass over you real fast? Or, I mean, what's the realistic expectation of surviving inside of one of those little shelters?
So yes, they're without teaching you your S-130 and S-190 classes about wildland firefighting. The hope is that the fire is moving fast enough that your shelter, basically, you want to be on bare earth, mineral soil, so you want to dig down to where it's just dirt and there's nothing flammable underneath you, and keep your fire shelter around the outside of you and let it provide thermal protection as the fire rolls over. Most fire shelter deployments that are survived are done in an area that has already burned out. So you have a buffer of, we call it the black, because it's, for obvious reasons, there's the green and the black. The green is unburned fuels. The black is already burned. So if anything's going to rekindle in that area, most of the fuel load is already gone. And there's actually, you can get on YouTube and Google surviving the shelter or something like that and listen to people talk about having been in a fire shelter when the fire rolls back over. But it's one of those things that if you're in the black, the odds of survival are much higher. If you're in the green, which is where the Granite Mountain hotshots were, your odds of survival are pretty low. There's a wildland school that we actually put on here at Fort Sill every year, and it's for all the firefighters, career and volunteer in Oklahoma. It's free. It's paid for by the state because 70% of the firefighters in the United States are volunteer. It's a fact that not a lot of people know. And unfortunately, a volunteer department's only as good as the training they can get. So we had a guy, the school is called the Destry Horton, the Wildland Roundup. And there was a guy whose name was Destry Horton. He was killed in a fire about 20 miles from my house right now. So about 30 miles from Fort Sill. He was killed in a fire there because there's really not a whole lot of training on the stuff. And after that happened, the state of Oklahoma said, man, that was bad. We need to do something. So they have all the forestry guys come out and teach classes and everything just about how we fight fires in Oklahoma. We don't do wildland firefighting like you see with the Forestry Service. We do grass fires because we don't really have trees and stuff. But that was, our version of that, of our lessons learned from the Granite Mountain incident, from the Destry Horton incident. So I've never been inside a shelter outside of practice deploying one, and I don't ever plan on it. But
man, that's got to be scary as fuck when you do that,
Well, it's like Q was saying, structural firefighting, which we do at Fort Sill, and wildland firefighting are two totally different things. Structural firefighting, you're wearing an air pack where you're breathing cool air that is clean. It's was filled up from a tank. It's all self-contained. You're wearing heavy gear that's thermally protective. Wildland firefighting, I basically got a long sleeve Nomex shirt on, Nomex pants, like a construction helmet, and a Nomex hood. Maybe sunglasses or goggles. I wear goggles because I don't like getting dirt in my eyes. But the tough guys, they wear sunglasses. But I mean, there's no respiratory protection, and you're wearing work gloves, and you're standing 5 feet from the fire line with a tool digging, or with a 1-inch booster line, putting water on it, and it gets real smoky and it gets real hot, and it's definitely a different animal. So
yeah, I bet. Q, if a wildland firefighter gets trapped in a fire, they're going to deploy a shelter. What happens if you are getting stuck in a structure? Let's say you're in like a warehouse or something, and you're exit has just got blocked. What do you do at that point?
So what we do is we kind of declare what's called a Mayday. So, now these days, everybody has radios, everybody has air packs with what's called a pass system. And what that does is it detects your movement, right? So when you stop moving for a period of time, this alarm will start going off, and it's extremely loud. The longer you remain motionless, you won't be able to turn it off unless you hit, a series of buttons or a sequence of a button. So this thing is super loud, and the thought there is, hey, I've declared a Mayday. I'm either trapped or I'm lost. Send in the RIT team, or send in the RIT. The RIT team, or the RIT, is the Rapid Intervention Team. And basically, these are guys that when you have a assignment to a structure fire, these guys just literally stand outside with their tools and with a RIT bag that has extra tank, extra mask, tools for getting a downed firefighter out. We run these drills so that literally these guys are just standing by. They don't go in and fight the fire. And if a firefighter goes down and declares a Mayday, those guys go in and get him. So what we try and do is we run drills that, so for the guys that declare a Mayday, they can say, okay, here's where I think I was last. Here's what I was doing. Here's what's happened to me. Here's the resources I have. Then the RIT will use that information to essentially try and come rescue the guy. Other things you can do is, hopefully you can find a second way out. Like obviously you try and self-rescue. So, if you're on the second floor, then, you try second or third floor or whatever, you try and signal to the guys outside where you are so they can get a ladder to that window or a door that's up there and get you out. So that's...
Have you ever had any close calls when you were in a structure fire?
Yes, actually. It was a little bit before, I think, our first podcast. I was in a pretty significant structure fire. It was a 2-story apartment building. It was like a very long apartment building, and pretty good working fire. And the second floor had heated up so much to the point where there was a lot of holes in the floor. So I was actually making my way up to with my partner, who was my senior man. I was making my way up to the second floor, and the second floor stairs had burned out. So it was just the second floor landing and the first floor landing, and that we had put a small ladder so that you could go up and down there. And as I was stepping off the ladder onto what I thought was a solid second floor, my foot went through the floor. So then I tried to take another step, and I reached out and grabbed something. I don't know what the heck I grabbed, but I thought my second foot was stable, so I put my weight on it, and then I fell through that portion too. So I tweaked my back pretty good. I was actually out of commission for about 3.5 weeks. At first, it was, we actually finished working in the fire. Everything was cool. Came back to the station, ran a couple more calls, and then I woke up in the morning. I was like, man, my back's kind of sore. I talked to my captain, and I was like, hey, boss, my back's a little sore. I might shrug off next day or whatever. He's like, nope, you're going to the hospital. I'm like, hey, let's calm down, boss. I don't need to go to the hospital. He's like, no, you're going. You need to get this stuff done. Go to the hospital. So I'm like, okay, fine. So literally, it was just, at the time, it felt like this big nonsensical show. I filled out this injury report form. The EMS unit that was there took me to the hospital, not lights and sirens or anything, but, they still took me to the hospital. So I'm there, like in my uniform, just like sitting there talking to the paramedics I just got off shift with. I'm like, yeah, whatever. It's, they're making fun of me a little bit.
I'll say probably getting harassed.
Oh yeah, oh for sure. Oh my God. So then we got to the hospital. I tell them what's going on. They give me a shot of Toradol in the rear, which was fantastic. And then about 2 days later, I was feeling generally okay, and I thought I was ready to go back to work. And I sat up on the edge of the bed, and I was just, kind of chit-chatting with the wife and kind of figuring out my plan for the day. And she went upstairs, and then I sneezed. And it was the sharpest, most horrible pain in my low back at L5, actually. And I just yelled, and so I came running out. She's like, "What's wrong?" I was like, "It hurts so bad. I can't move." I was able to stand up, but then I literally couldn't put on my shorts by myself. Like, it was a weird struggle because I couldn't bend too far forward without excruciating pain. So I went through some physical therapy and chiropractic work, and I ended up being okay. I mean, there was some disc damage. The doc wasn't convinced it was a full-on rupture, but he's like, there is some disc involvement there. So he's like, you need some downtime, take it easy, and just chill at home. So,
dude, there's nothing worse than hurting like your back or your shoulder. You realize how much it's like involved in everything you do,
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about too. I messed my back up about a year before I got out, and I've never really got over it.
Yeah.
And even now, sometimes I'll do something and tweak it, and for like a week, it's like, dude, I can barely get out of bed, can barely tie my shoes. So I know exactly what you're talking about, and that is like the worst.
Oh, yeah.
I'm actually probably going to go back to the VA and get it checked on, because I'm at the point now where when I stand up and walk around, if I'm up for like more than 10 or 15 minutes, my left leg starts going numb.
Ooh.
It's like, I'm all fucked up, man. Yeah, it's just one of those things. And I'm like you. I'm like, I don't need to go to the hospital yet. Like, I'll just, it's fine.
If I may throw something in there, because, my side of that story, my wife calls me one morning frantic. She goes, his wife, she goes, "Abby just texted me. Quentin fell through the second story of a building. He's in the hospital. She's on her way up there." And I was like, "Oh my goodness, what happened?" So that was all the information I got was, hey, he fell through.
You're thinking the worst now.
Right, because one thing that, the thing that makes the writ so challenging, like he was talking about, is unlike the movies, it is smoky and dark and impossible to see inside of a structure fire. I mean, it's so dark you can't see anything. You're just kind of bumping into things, and that's how you figure out. You're like, oh, that feels like a table. I must be in the kitchen, or oh, that feels like a bathtub. I'm in the bath. It really is disorienting, and I mean, just close your eyes and try and crawl around your neighbor's house that you've never been in before. So I was sitting there, I was freaking out for a while. I texted him. I was like, "Hey man, call me when you get a chance. Heard you got hurt. Hope everything's okay." And that's when he comes out with his eye. "Oh, dude, I'm fine, man. I just fell through the floor. It ain't a big deal. Just make sure you stand on the floor and make sure it's solid next time if you ever walk on one." I'm like, "No, you fell through the floor, dude. You're not good." He's like, "No, I'm good. I didn't go all the way through."
It's totally fine. It's absolutely normal.
Yeah, so it was that. I feel like his story needed a little bit more emphasis on the fact that some of us didn't get all the information right away, and we had like 15 minutes of holy crap going through our head before we
just
figured
like
out what happened.
Just like people that like my family and your guys' family and stuff like that. Anybody that has a military family, if something was to happen to one of us training overseas or anything like that, I can't imagine what the family is thinking while they're waiting on details. You know what I'm saying? Because just like you said, you don't really have context. So you get like, hey, they're injured and they're in the hospital, and you don't get a lot of details, So that's rough, man. That's rough on a family. I can't imagine the stress and stuff I put on my mom and my dad and everybody while I was always gone and doing crazy stuff that we used to do. Before we move on, I'd like to talk about Levi, if you want. I'd like to start with you. I know a lot of people get out of the military, and becoming a firefighter or EMT is like a really popular option for a lot of people. Do you want to explain what the hiring process is like on the federal side, and then what kind of like your your fire academy, if you have one, what that is like and what people could expect if they decide to go that route? And then Q, we'll jump over to you and you can explain it for the municipal side.
Cool.
Yeah, that's great because they're two totally different worlds. although they're the same different. So for the federal fire service, if you want to be on a military installation to be a firefighter, you are expected to be able to do all your structural firefighting and wildland firefighting, as well as all your hazmat incidents. It's one of those, we call it an all hazards response, and really it's the jack of all trades thing. It's kind of like being an 0861. You're expected to be able to do mortars, artillery, naval gunfire, aircraft, deconfliction, planning. I mean, they just expect you to know everything, which is where it gets kind of hard because you end up having to be good at just one thing and decent at the others. But the Federal Fire Service, a fully certified federal firefighter is a GS7 employee, and they are, you'll have all your fire academy stuff, which is firefighter 1, firefighter 2, hazmat awareness, hazmat operations, as well as EMT basic. And then on top of that, you have to have all your driver certifications. So you need to be able to drive the engine company, which is just your typical fire truck that's got the hoses and the pump and everything. Your aerials, which is your ladder trucks. Because we are military, you have to be able to do airport rescue and firefighting. So the crash trucks to deal with aircraft fires. And then you have to be able to drive all your mobile water supplies because, again, with the wildland side, there's not fire hydrants out in the middle of the training area. So we bring our own water. We basically have like big tanker trucks full of water that we bring out there. So you got to be able to, and we can do all sorts of cool things. Then we can suck water out of a creek if we need to fill it up. We can push it different. There's a lot of stuff. So all your driver certifications, and then your hazmat tech. So you got to be a hazmat technician, which is the guys that you see, like the 2319 guys from Monsters Inc., where they're wearing the full-on suit and they're actually going and plugging the leak or cleaning up whatever hazardous material it is. So there's a lot of stuff that it takes. The Federal Service doesn't actually run a fire academy. We work through AFCISA, which is the Air Force training, and you basically, it's kind of like MarineNet. You get a MarineNet course that you do, and then you get proctored. You actually have a hands-on evaluation. You're proctored by someone, usually from your department. AFCISA has the option to send their own proctor down, but usually if your department is in good standing and they're not, pencil whipping everybody's reports, then you have one of your firefighters. Like, I just got my evaluation done, and they had a firefighter from a different station that I'd never worked with before do my evaluation, so that way there was no bias. But you can get everything done. You can be a guy that, for the Federal Service, the most important thing you need to get hired is a DD-214 with an honorable discharge. I mean, that's really, that's really what it is, because the Federal Service, the GS employee, the civil service was designed with veterans in mind when it first came out back in the 40s or 50s, whatever. It was meant for veterans, so that's really the audience they're trying to market to now. With that being said, anybody can join. We have quite a few. Like our fire chief, for example, was non-military, so you can join depending on how many people they need to hire. Do they need to hire someone? And as long as you have something to bring to the table. But it definitely helps if you've gone through a fire academy and have a little bit of experience. It helps for two reasons. One is if you start off with Fire 1, Fire 2, Hazmat Awareness, Hazmat Ops, and Airport Firefighter, you don't come in as a GS3 or a GS4. You get to come in as a GS5. So you automatically start out making, out here, I think a GS5 is $50,000 a year. So it's definitely beneficial in that aspect. But
once you're in the federal system as a firefighter, is it pretty easy to transfer from station to station if you need to? Like if you say your family's moving or you decide to move from Fort Sill to Virginia, is it pretty easy to get as long as they have an opening to jump into a separate fire department? Yeah,
absolutely. As long as they have an opening, if you apply for it, there's they always look for, when they put a job opening out, it's all done through USA Jobs. When they put a job opening out, most of the other fire chiefs in the Federal Service know that opening's happening. They kind of get the inside baseball with that, if you will. And it's kind of, hey, if anybody wants to apply for this, it's open to federal employees, but it's not open to the public yet. And then you can put your application in just like you normally would. And it's relatively easy if you're if you're in good standing with your department, because if I say we had a guy recently, he left Fort Sill and he went to Altus Air Force Base, which is about an hour west of us. And he put in his application, and like that same day, their fire chief called our fire chief and said, "Hey, I see your boy wants to leave. Is like, tell me about him." And the chief says, "Yeah, hey, he's a good dude. He's just trying to find someone that's closer to home." Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll go ahead. We're going to hire him. So, like me,
That's pretty awesome.
I knew a couple of the Fort Sill firefighters. One of them actually taught my fire academy. And he told me about the job opening that I ended up getting. And he said, "Hey man, if you want this, give me your resume. Send me your resume and your DD-214. I will hand deliver it to the assistant chief tomorrow when I go to work. And we'll get you." So they, in that aspect, they did a by name hire for me. I didn't have to actually sit down and do any of the legwork to get an interview. I got a by name hire interview. Nice. Basically because I knew somebody, and that's with contracting, because I did private contracting for a little bit. Contracting or federal service, knowing someone and having a DD-214 and a clean record is going to take you so far.
Yeah, I try to push it a lot I've said it on multiple podcasts, but networking, people that don't understand networking are really missing out on opportunities, because most jobs, I think, come like that, like word of mouth. Hey, I know this guy, because it's always a lot easier for someone to hire somebody when they have somebody that can literally vouch for them, rather than just a name on a piece of paper. Networking is key, man. Like, I try to talk to, now I'm on podcasts, so I'm networking with everybody, but before I would always try to just talk to people and stuff like that and just get my name out there, because you never know, man, when you can help them out, they can help you out. Like, networking is definitely key. How long from the time that someone like applies on USA Jobs does it normally take for them to get actually hired onto the fire department for the federal service?
So, it's situation dependent. We actually have a guy who got hired and now has a TBD start date due to this whole coronavirus nonsense we're dealing with, because they froze everything. So we have a guy that he's been told, "Hey, you got the job, man. When can you start?" And he said, "I can start, in March." And they said, "All right, cool. Oh, wait, hold on." But usually, and we've talked about this on my last podcast, but I want to bring it up one more time just for anybody listening. USA Jobs, it's just an algorithm that looks for keywords to try and get you past. They're the metering device of what actually goes to the fire chief and the assistant chiefs. So you have to say the right things on your resume in USA Jobs in order for it to make it past their little robot computer that that filters it. So for anybody listening, if you're looking, and this is not just for the fire service, for any federal job that you use on USA Jobs, the best advice I can give you is build your resume, format, obviously tailor your resume towards the job you want. We know that, but then copy the entire job posting on USA Jobs, like the entire page, copy it, and then paste it into the header or the footer on your resume and make it white ink. So that way you can't see it, but the computer will read all the words that are there. And then when you submit your resume, save it as a PDF instead of a Word document and submit it. That way nobody can open up the header or the footer. So basically you have an invisible header or footer that has every single keyword from the job listing that the computer is looking for. And it's just kind of one of those Lance Corporal Underground tricks of the trade. You have to, because there are so many good people that don't make it places because they just can't get an opportunity because there's a third party, whether it be a computer or a person that just doesn't understand. Point in case, I actually applied for a contracting gig at March Air Force Base when I was getting out of the Marine Corps because we thought about staying in Temecula for a little while, and it was right up the road. And the job they wanted an Air Force JTAC, and I applied for it. And I talked to this headhunter who was just a third party, independent contractor headhunter, and he told me, "Hey man, you don't qualify. You weren't Air Force." And I had to explain to him. I said, "Hey, J stands for joint. It's multinational. We're all certified the same. I've worked with this, that, or the other." And he told me that he's like, "We can't hire you because you're not an Air Force JTAC." And I was like, "Bro, the job is to teach UAV pilots how to work with ground controllers. I have hours and hours of doing that. I know what I'm doing, but it is what it is.
I think I know the job you're talking about too.
Yeah. So it would have been a pretty cake gig, I guess. But at the same time, I was ready to be out of California. I live on a farm out here in Oklahoma now, so I enjoy the rural lifestyle. But to bring it back full circle, that's really I would say that if you haven't heard anything back within a week, reformat your resume and resubmit it. There's no limit on how many times you could submit for a job, to my knowledge. I could be wrong, but to my knowledge, there's no limit on how many times you can submit.
Okay. What about you, Q? How's it work on the municipal side? Obviously, it's going to different depending on the state and the county and all that stuff. But you're in Ohio, or you said Cleveland, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So again, I work for 3 different departments. Cleveland, obviously, being like a major city department. Medina and Copley are more of smaller areas, but they're kind of similar. So, as far as our capabilities go, as far as those 2 smaller departments, they're very similar to what Levi has on the federal side, other than like crash, fire, rescue for airports. So, across all 3 of those departments, I've gone to car wrecks for all 3, structure fires for all 3. They all have kind of generally the same requirements. They want you to be firefighter 1 and 2, and at least the EMT.
What does that mean? Firefighter 1 and 2.
So
I know it's like a ranking, but
so firefighter 1 and 2. That's basically just, in a sense, an hourage requirement of these are the hours I spent doing firefighter related training, and here are the specific trainings during that time period that I covered. And state by state, it's kind of like different, but nationwide, it's almost, the same nationwide.
The IFSAC and Pro Board certifications are good in all 50 states. Yeah.
Yep. So that's literally what I was going to say next. But so for like my smaller departments, so Medina and Copley have a little bit different requirements. So to get on Copley, and for most smaller departments that you'll see, especially in the state of Ohio, they want you to be a firefighter 1 and 2 and a paramedic, because if you're that, they almost don't have any training to get you. You've proven yourself intelligent enough to do basically any other thing in the fire service. Just because firefighter 1 and 2 aren't bad. I mean, we hear the jokes that firemen are dumb, but those 2 courses are really not that hard. But paramedic school is extremely challenging. Like, what I compare it to is, if anybody here has gone through TACP school, I found paramedic school to be much harder than TACP school, just because of the amount of information you have to know, memorize, and the way you have to treat patients. It's just, everything is so reliant on every other thing, and it's just really difficult.
I think people outside of that community don't realize the different levels of like EMT, paramedic, and stuff like that, and how much work it takes to get to like being a paramedic. So I mean, that's kind of a big deal. How long does it normally take from like, I'm just a regular dude to get like a paramedic certification?
So for the actual paramedic certification, so let's say you're just talking about the course to become a paramedic, most places that's 2 years. The course I went through was 10 months long. So they're packing 2 years worth of stuff into 10 months. And I mean, it's feet to the fire. Like, if you fail a test or 2, like, you're out, you're done. That's it. The course itself costs about $5,600. So it's a pricey course, and I mean, and it should be, because you get access to a lot of materials. You're actually, through paramedic school, you get to treat patients. You get to assess patients. You get to ride on ambulances, go with fire departments, work at hospitals. Like, you're doing it, So it's a tough course, and it's it's like there's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
But again, and that's just for paramedic school. Now, to become a paramedic, first you have to be an EMT or higher. So in order, you have EMR, which is just like basic first responder type stuff. Then you have EMT B, EMT basic, which they're more certified to do any exterior treatments. So like they can give you O2, they can do CPR, they can assess patients, see what's kind of going on with patients, try and make recommendations as far as what's going on with the patient and what might need to happen. Then you have EMT advanced, which there's not a whole heck of a lot of EMT advanced in Ohio, at least. I from what I understand, it's a little bit different in Oklahoma and different depending on state to state. But they can do IVs, intravenous access, and just a very narrow bandwidth of drugs. Paramedics, we can do it all. We're intubating you, which means we're putting a tube down your throat if you need it to breathe. We're doing IV. We're pushing serious drugs like narcotics, drugs that can stop your heart. We're doing electrotherapy, which would be like defibrillation, cardioversion, pacing, things like that. We're doing EKGs. We're assessing all those. So, paramedic is pretty much the highest you can go. However, there are like small little up levels within that. So like imagine like put being a paramedic on the same level as being a JTAC. Now you can be a JTAC-E, and just like in the paramedic community, you can be a paramedic instructor, or you can be a paramedic critical care, which you can do extended transport. So you're talking like if a patient needs to go from let's say, a very rural hospital, 2 to 3 hours away to a major unit at another hospital, that paramedic, critical care paramedic is going to be with that patient doing the transport, making sure their ventilator stays active and working properly, making sure their drugs are staying appropriate. So like, you'll have patients that need drugs every, so often at different time intervals and different doses and maintenance doses and things like that without getting too technical on you. So, you have the levels within that in and of itself. But like I said, in order to go to paramedic school, you got to be an EMT, and EMT, that course kind of varies, but usually it's about a semester long. So again, you're looking at 2, maybe 3 years to be completely certified to, practice essentially mobile medicine as a first responder.
Do you guys have an actual? When you went to go do? All right, for your hiring process, how long did it take from the time you applied to the time you actually got hired on? For what's the average time? Because I know you obviously work for a couple different services, and then also. Did you go through an actual academy? Is there an actual academy you attend, or is it just like you take these classes and then you apply?
Okay, so again, for the municipal side, I'll talk about Cleveland, and then I'll talk about my other 2 departments. Well, I'll talk about my other 2 departments first, then Cleveland. So with my other 2 departments, Medina, they'll sometimes hire a guy on that has nothing. So you're just some Joe Schmo off the streets, and you're like, hey, I want to be a firefighter. Cool. We're going to send you to a fire academy, and we're going to send you to EMT school. So usually they want to get you to a fire academy first. That way, they can get you on a rig and riding and responding to calls. Then they like to get you to EMT school so that you can then start, responding to medical emergencies, because believe it or not, for most places, most of their calls, so 80% of most fire departments' calls are medical. Only 20% is fire. Now, depending on the fire department that you're at, those numbers can vary. For Cleveland, I would say it's maybe more around 60-40 per se. From Medina, I would say that number is probably a little bit more accurate, 80-20. Now for Medina, sometimes, like I said, they'll hire a guy on with nothing. And that process really is dependent on how badly they need guys. My hiring process for them was really short. It was like 2 to 3 months. And that's like, for getting on any fire department, that's lightning fast. Like, that's awesome. And generally speaking, getting hired on any fire department, the process is, you apply online or in person. At some point, they're going to have you take a test, written test. Then they're going to, once you pass the test, they'll run you through a background check, they'll run you through a medical check, and they'll run you through a physical ability test of some sort. Not necessarily in that order. Once you pass all these things, then you get hired, you go through your probationary period, and that's pretty much that. So Medina was really quick. Copley was actually really quick too, just because I happened to get in at the right time. Cleveland, totally different ball game. So with your bigger cities like that, your hiring process is going to be excruciatingly slow. So I actually grew up in Akron, Ohio, home of LeBron James. And that was the first department I applied to. I applied to them in 2016. And this is just to kind of give you a frame of reference. They called me back in 2019.
Oh, Jesus, really?
Yeah. And that's,
God.
and that's like not that bad of wait time. There's some departments out in like California where you're going to be waiting anywhere from 4 to 10 years sometimes. Like it can be really that. Oh yeah.
Why?
Really that slow. It's one of those jobs that is looked at as very, very stable, and you have a low turnover rate, generally speaking, for number one. For number two, you have a massive amount of applicants. So for my Akron test, over 1,000 people took that, what's called the civil service exam, and it's extremely similar to the ASVAB. So 1,000 people took the Akron test that I took. Cleveland, I took their test. I to be 100% honest, I took Cleveland's test for shits and giggles. I really didn't think I was going to get hired. I just took it for experience of taking tests. And they kept calling me back, so now I'm a Cleveland firefighter, which is awesome.
There you go.
But Cleveland's test, I think over 5,000 people took that test. So loads of people are taking this test. And there's a lot of people who want the job, but there's also a lot of people who are kind of on unemployment, and they're just taking the test just to show proof that, hey, I'm still looking for a job. They don't want the job. So then, the civil service committee's responsibility to kind of weed through these applicants. Okay, who actually wants this job? Who scored high enough? And literally, like on our test, like 2 or 3 points will move you 10 people. On like FDNY's test, literally, because I have a buddy in New York who's actually took their test. Like literally, a point will move you sometimes a couple hundred people. So the points are massive. So for bigger departments, the civil service test is the key. Like that's the thing that everything, the hiring process revolves around. That'll give you your ranking, and that'll pretty much carry you through the rest of the test. So I take Cleveland Fire Department's test, and from the time of application to the time I set foot in the academy, which means I'm officially hired, I'm officially on the Cleveland Fire Department, that was about a year and a month. So, and again, and I was in the first class off that test. So that tells you how slow, being, and I was the 11th guy. So I was.
So it's probably So it's probably smart if guys are still in the military to start applying before they get out.
Absolutely.
Like start a year
Wherever
out.
you want to go, apply there as soon as you can. And I've actually talked to a couple guys still in the military about this because they were looking to be firefighters. And I'm like, hey, the most valuable thing you can do if you're applying for a municipal fire department, like, in hometown USA or whatever, the most valuable thing you can do is try and get your EMT and paramedic first. Because that, like, once you get those two things, you're going to have to be beating back departments with a stick. Like, it's insane. Because, again, EMS really supports the fire service. I know I'm going to catch it from some firefighters because they don't like EMS, but, hey, that's the reality of the ballgame. EMS absolutely props up the fire service in most places. Places like Cleveland, we run what's called a third service. So we have Cleveland Fire Department that's standalone. You have Cleveland Police Department that's standalone. And then you have Cleveland EMS, which is standalone. Mm-hmm. Now, yes, we all, work together in some capacities, but we are all absolutely separate departments. Like you have the fire chief, you have the EMS commissioner, and you have the police chief. So 3 different departments that funnel into public safety. But so back to the hiring process. So I take the civil service exam. And again, this is where it will kind of align with federal a little bit. The most valuable things you have for municipal fire is first and foremost your DD-214. That will almost guaranteed get you, a certain amount of points or a certain percentage of points. And usually it's about equal to residency. So residency is another big draw. Like in the state of Ohio, you cannot keep anyone from being hired due to them not living in the city. But, if you do live in the city, you get more points on the test, basically.
Yeah.
So usually military and residency are the 2 big things you can have points-wise. But again, I'm not a resident of Cleveland. I live in Medina, which is about 45 minutes south of Cleveland. So, and I still get hired. But the DD-214 really helped me out, and disabled military status. That is huge. No one can deny you a job if you are a disabled veteran. Now, obviously, if your disabilities prevent you from doing the job, then, that'll disqualify you. But, any disability that doesn't prevent you from actually doing the job, you get preference over essentially everybody else. So I had disabled military, which really helped me out. Some departments will give credit, will give points or percentage points for college, EMT, paramedic, and I think that's about it. So residency and military, disabled military are real big ones. Then, paramedic, EMT, and college credit. Okay. So I had those, and it really helped my ranking. And the example I'll give is when the first list came out, I was ranked 152, and they said in the email, like, this is with 0 veterans points. I'm like, yo, what the F? So I called the civil service committee, and I'm like, hey, you didn't put my, disabled veteran stuff in. We're like, oh, well, you didn't serve in the military. I'm like, the fuck I didn't, And I was like, hey, here's my stuff. And you're like, oh, okay, well, we'll go back and take a look at it, and they did. And I went from 152 down to 11. So
sick.
Firmly placing me, like, once that came out, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get hired. Like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
So after that, after the civil service exam, I then had to take a physical agility test. So did that, knocked that out of the park. I mean, these physical agility tests aren't hard. The only difficulty really is the technique of doing certain things. So things you might not be used to. So if anybody's going to apply for, fire department, find out what physical agility test they use and find some way to practice it. Then next they ran me through background check, which was, pretty extensive. They have you kind of fill out some forms like you would for like a secret or a top secret clearance. And then they go talk to people that you've listed, and then they talk to people that they know that might know you, and They look at your transcripts,
That's pretty in depth for a fire department. I didn't
oh
think
yeah.
it'd be
And,
that.
and, and,
Huh.
and you gotta keep in mind that, yeah, it's just hometown USA, but you're being trusted to go into people's homes, when they're dead, dying, or bleeding, unconscious maybe, and they're trusting you not to take their stuff. They're trusting you to give
Is
them.
that an issue?
No. But I'm saying, like, these are the reasons the process is so in depth.
Yeah.
People, well, why do you need to do all that? Well, they're extending a crap ton of trust to
Yeah.
you as Joe Schmo firefighter. So they do that, and then they run you through a pretty good medical, and then they run you through psych, which isn't too bad. And then for some departments, they run you through a polygraph examination.
Mm-hmm.
Cleveland, they didn't, but it just really kind of depends on your department. So once all that's
Cool.
knocked out, like I said, that took a year. And at the time, I was actually still going through like paramedic school and working. Then I got accepted into the fire academy. So you essentially get your orders. They literally send you a thing in the mail like, "Hey, congratulations, you've been hired. Report to the fire academy at this date, this time."
Yeah.
You go. So the fire academy was about 5.5 months ish. And for Cleveland, you learn the book method. Like, they have books that they put out. Like, the first couple months, for Cleveland specific, you had to go through EMT class. So they're making everybody EMTs. Even if you're already a paramedic, they have to put you all through the same stuff.
That sucks.
Yeah, it was kind of a drag, but I mean, it is what it is. So we went through EMT, and then you get to the fun stuff, the fire stuff. So you're learning about fire behavior, fire tools, structure of the fire department, how the fire department functions. Now, again, you're learning the book method. Let me stress that. So
Yeah.
to kind of put that in perspective, it's not like the Marine Corps when you're learning out of a pub, when guys in the community who actually do this job are writing the publications. They are firefighters writing the publications, but it's mostly like your smaller departments. And I'm not trying to disparage anybody, but it's mostly your smaller departments that have a lot of time on their hands to write these, essentially manuals and books that don't fight fire like we fight fire. I'm not saying that they're worse or better or whatever. They just don't fight it the way we fight it. So while kind of learning the book method to pass the test and pass the pro boards, which is basically your hands-on portion, the instructor staff is teaching you the Cleveland way of doing things. Now, most major universities do have a fire academy. So like the University of Akron or Cleveland State University, Ohio State University, all of them have fire programs that will make you a certified Fire 1 and Fire 2 guy. All of them have, Cleveland State doesn't, but like Tri-C, which is another college here. But most of them will have like an EMT, and some will have a paramedic program that's ran through the hospital. So you can actually become fully certified going to college and get a degree. And that's kind of what I did-ish. So I got my Fire 1 and Fire 2 through Cleveland Fire Department. But while I was doing the Cleveland Fire Academy, I was actually finishing paramedic school, which got me my associate's degree. And to anybody listening now, I would highly recommend doing that. However, I don't recommend doing paramedic school while doing a fire academy. It's absolutely miserable. You're not going to see your family. You're going to be constantly on the go. But
be in the books and on the go.
Oh, dude. I mean, so my day literally was wake up at 4 a.m. to beat Cleveland traffic because we had to be there much earlier than everybody else. Plus, I had to be there earlier than all my other fellow cadets to get a good spot so I could, as soon as the academy was over at 4, I could jump in my car and speed down to Akron to be there by 5:45 for paramedic school class. And
Oh,
I would
nice.
do clinical rotations, which I'm either riding an ambulance or doing rounds at a hospital until about midnight. And then I'm doing clinical rotations all during the weekend. So literally, I didn't see my family. Like, I kissed them goodbye in the morning when they were still sleeping, and I kissed them goodnight when I got home while they were sleeping. So it sucked. My nephew was actually born at the time, and I forget how old he is because I literally missed a year of his life. It was just crazy. But so back to my recommendation. Anybody who's listening to this, I highly recommend getting your degree, because the fire service is moving in the direction that they want degreed personnel, especially if you're going to pick up rank like lieutenant, captain, assistant chief, battalion chief. They want to see, formally educated people. So I recommend that.
I know some departments, regionally, people have different things that they have to have, like swift water rescue and stuff like that. Are you guys involved in anything like that? And what is like the, what kind of follow-on training do you have to get these like specialty, because I know they have divers and everything else like that. So let me start with Levi.
Yeah, go ahead.
Start with Levi. Do you guys do that on the federal side at all?
Yes. So it kind of goes back to that all hazards response. We're rope rescue, high angle rescue certified. We're confined space rescue certified, trench rescue, structural collapse rescue. Because one of the benefits we have is Fort Sill butts up against the wildlife refuge, which is also federal land. And a lot of times people will get lost, or they'll fall down the side of the mountain, and it's a volunteer department that responds. And volunteer departments, not dogging them at all. I'm on one out here as well. But I mean, we don't get funding. We make our money with fundraisers. So we've got like a 1985 pickup truck that's one of our fire trucks.
Nice.
Yeah. So so anytime there's something like that, Fort Sill is requested to bring, because we federal money. We got money for days because the government has great credit according to themselves. So but we'll go out and do high angle rescues and stuff. So we did. There's different levels of swiftwater rescue. We do have some issues with flooding on Fort Sill, and there are some times we actually had a soldier drown back in 2015. He tried to drive his Jeep through one of the low water crossings that had about 4 feet of water in it, and it was moving really quickly, and it just took his Jeep and it ended up pulling his body a couple miles down the road.
Jeez.
Or down the creek out of there. It was very unfortunate. So turn around.
I was reading something the other day that was saying that a foot of water can float most vehicles away. I was like, what? I didn't realize it that shallow. That's crazy.
If you filled your tires with lead, probably work all right. But because they're filled with air, it creates a lot of buoyancy. I mean, you've got my 1-ton pickup truck. It weighs 8,500 pounds, but I've got 70 psi of air in each tire, and the 35-inch tire. So it will float it, depending on how quickly it's moving. If it's standing still, you'll be just fine. But if there's any movement to it at all, and especially when it's runoff from a flood, you've got water moving 25, 30 miles an hour, it'll move it pretty quickly. So. So we do things like that. We actually have a couple of boats at Fort Sill that we are not allowed to use, and the long and short of that, without again, this is Levi's opinion. Long and short of that is we actually we sent a bunch of guys up to Oklahoma City, because for Oklahoma, OKC, those are the guys to be. They rescue stuff. They are on point with it. Firefighting, they're on point with it. I mean, they're kind of the idols of Oklahoma as far as firefighting is concerned. And they have a swiftwater rescue course up there. And we sent some guys up there, and the biggest issue we have was scheduling, just trying to backfill, because Uncle Sugar doesn't want to pay overtime for 14 guys, so that way these 14 guys can go play in the water and also get paid. And and it was just a scheduling conflict. And then the other issue is a lot of people were getting hurt up there.
Oh, really?
Well, because again, it's Oklahoma, so it's kind of like what they call the Los Angeles River, where it's just like a giant concrete canal.
Yeah.
That there's a river rafting place up in Oklahoma City, which is where they do the course, and it's just a concrete canal with like turbulent water that runs through it. So really the issue is scheduling, but yeah, we do have to do quite a bit of wilderness rescue, a lot of search and rescue stuff. We do swift water rescue, confined space rescue, high angle rescue. It's a lot of fun stuff.
Do you want to define what a confined space or high angle rescue are? What those two different things are?
Yeah, absolutely. So high angle rescue is there's actually, I don't know if it hit your guys' Facebook, but there was let's say a semi truck. This happened earlier today. A semi truck drives and crashes on a bridge, and the actual like rig of the motor part of the truck is hanging off the edge, and the trailer's up on the bridge. You got to get the driver out, but he's hanging 50 to 100 feet above the ground, so somebody has to go get him. So we're talking ropes and having things set up, lowering a guy down to rappel down to get him and get him out that way. And confined space rescue is just simply a small place that's not meant for human occupancy for more than just doing a quick job. So think sewers, the tunnels that have electrical conduit running underneath them, any of those places like that.
That does not sound like fun, trying to get into... I mean, I'm a big dude, so crawling into anything like that and trying to pull somebody out would be horrible.
If you're claustrophobic, it's definitely not fun. We have our training tower at Fort Sill, because when we had some dudes from the East Coast that were like, they wrote the book on confined space and rope rescue and cave rescue and all that stuff. We have a training tower. It's 4 stories tall. It's kind of stepped. It's tiered. So there's a 4-story part, a 3-story part, and a 2-story part. And on the 2-story part, there's a hatch on top that you can open up, and it's a 24-inch diameter tube that goes all the way down to the floor level. And they put a dummy down on the floor and the ground level, and we had to send rescuers down through the 24-inch tube, lower them down through that tube. And of course, you're on air, so you've got your mask on, and you've got air hoses that go all the way to the top that you're hoping don't catch and kink because it'll rip it off your face, and go all the way down. And yeah, no, it's definitely one of those things you really gotta dig deep and reach down and grab a hold of your boys to not look goofy in front of your friends. But that's one thing that was kind of cool that they stressed in the course. Like, look, man, everybody's breaking point is different on different days. If you're gearing up, the guy was saying, he's like, this is an old guy, was in his 50s. He's like, I've been doing this forever. He was talking about a cave. Well, it was a recovery. Difference between a rescue and recovery is whether the person's alive or not, right? So they were trying to recover a body out of a cave. Some teens had gone down to this cave, and the rains came and it flooded it. And anyway, they were getting ready to go into this, and he's like, man, me and this guy for 20 years have been working together. We've been in some really crazy places. And that day, man, he was gearing up and he's shaking. He said, man, I can't do this. I can't do this. And that was the big thing that said is like, if you are not 100% comfortable doing it, nobody will make fun of you. No harm, no foul. Just come off the line. Someone else will go in and do it. But it's interesting.
I can see how that could be. Oh, I bet. Let's say I'm like a hearse master or something like that before I leave the Marine Corps. Does any of that transfer over when you guys go and do stuff like rappelling and stuff with the fire department?
So it transfers knowledge wise, but not certification wise.
Okay.
There's it's that age old saying, nobody cares what you did, they care what you're doing or are going to do. With the exception of, we've got quite a few guys that were firefighters in the Army or the Air Force or the Marine Corps that are on my department, and all that firefighting stuff transferred over because it's all IFSAC certified.
It's all the same job field.
Yeah, IFSAC is basically just the national accreditation for firefighting. That's fine. But like for me being a JTAC, they still made me go and attend the class on what an LZ for basically a civilian medevac helicopter should look like, and how to mark it, and where to not walk in a helicopter. I'm like, dude.
Was it much different than what you already knew?
It's a little bit different because they're smaller. They're like the size of Hueys, and they're comfortable landing in 75 feet by 75 feet areas. And also, one thing I did not know is I didn't know that they flew with MVGs on.
Oh,
Because I was sitting here, I brought to the table, I was like, okay, well, in my gear, I carry a signal mirror and a buzzsaw, right? Your typical LZ
okay.
marking stuff, especially on the volunteer department out here. I bring that stuff. And I was, it's similar. It really isn't that much different when you talk to the pilots, because almost all the pilots are prior military.
Yeah.
I was talking to a guy who was, I was asking him, I said, hey man, because they give the typical, hey, you're all civilians, you don't know any better. Look, man, we can't see power lines. We have a hard time seeing fences. We can't see LED lights through our MVGs. You can't just say land in front of my pickup truck. That doesn't help. You need, the typical,
Yeah.
real basic stuff. And I went up to the guy after class and I said, hey man, would you be able to take like a NATO LZ brief? And he goes, dude, yes. He goes, did you serve? I was like, yeah, I was in the Marine Corps. I was a JTAC. He goes, oh, no way. He goes, I was an Apache pilot. I was like, oh, that's cool. I was like, and he's like, did you ever do any time down range? He's like, yeah, I went to Afghanistan 3 times. And we started talking. He's like, man, I was flying escorts for your medevacs. I guarantee we talked to each other at some point. So,
That's cool.
it was kind of cool like that. But there is some overlap. But as far as like the training chief is concerned, it doesn't matter, So.
Unlike the helicopter thing, like California, and I know Los Angeles specifically, they have a helicopter like fire squad that goes out to put out like brush fires and stuff like that. Quentin, do you have that? Anything like that in your area? Or is there anything for you, Levi?
Nothing fire related. Yeah, we do have medevac birds here. But like Medina, my Medina Fire Department, they have a city aspect and a very rural aspect. So yeah, they've landed helos before, but I mean Cleveland, like it's a city of Cleveland. There's buildings and stuff. They're not doing anything like that.
Well, and what Justin's referencing is that Cal Fire Hell Attack.
Yeah.
So I know exactly what you're talking about, because I thought that would be a cool job to get at one point in time. Yeah, they.
Do you no longer think that?
I love wildland firefighting is my passion. I love being outside. I mean, structure fires are cool and all, but man, being outside and working a fire line is just, there's nothing like it. And I really enjoy it, but dude, it's hard work. It is rough. And you look at like the actual forestry guys to go out and do it. They'll take these guys, put them in a helicopter, drop them on the side of a mountain, and these guys will cut 3 miles worth of fire line where they'll have an 8-inch line, 8 inches in width, dug clear down to mineral soil, and it'll be 3 miles long, and they'll do it with a 24-man hand crew. And so they're just shovels, axes, picks.
Work.
It'll show you how tough you really are. And so like I said, we are not wildland firefighters at Fort Sill. We fight range fires. We drive pickup trucks with water tanks on them out there. We do some hand tool stuff, and we spray water with the pickup trucks. The big advantage we have with being on a military installation is the impact area. We don't drive out there because there's too much UXO. Too many. We actually had a guy. Side note, real quick. He had a 105 round EOD. When they clear areas, we have red, yellow, and green areas. Red, we don't go in. Yellow, we can go in there as long as we stay inside the truck. Green, we get out and walk. And he was in a green area, and EOD says, hey, there's a 95% chance that it's completely cleared. Like we can only go so far. I mean, so every now and then they find like cannonballs from immediately after the Civil War that wash up out of the ground, So, but we had a 105 round cooked off about 100 feet from him. And yeah, he took a bunch of shrapnel. It completely destroyed the truck. Basically, EOD told him, no, I said, you're lucky you were standing where you were because it blew out the end caps. It didn't, because it was a cook off. So it blew out the front, the nose plug for the fuse and the tail. And that's why it completely destroyed the pickup truck.
This was just some random round out there that just randomly went off while he was out there?
Yeah, because it was on fire.
Shitty luck.
He was out putting a fire out, and it was sitting out in the grass, and it was one EOD missed because whether it was buried under the dirt or whatever, I mean, nothing's 100% in life. So anyway, but we'll go out there and we'll spray water and put the fires out that way. But if in the green and the yellow, and but if it's in the red, we don't go in that area because EOD doesn't sweep that. It's the impact area. So if we have a fire that's in the red, dude, life is easy. We go to a fire break out there, and we just take our drip torches, which is basically just a like a 2.5-gallon can filled with 50% diesel, 50% gasoline, and it's got a little wick on it. You light the wick, you turn it upside down and dump it, and you just dump fire on the ground. And we'll just all as the fire's running towards us, we'll just light the ground on front of us on fire and let it run back towards itself. And now you just got one giant
Stop
fire,
itself.
but we can control where it starts at that point. So
yeah.
So we don't do any hell attack stuff. Like I said, being a wildland firefighter would be awesome, but the biggest reason that stopped me from it is it's a seasonal job. Until you can get hired on a full-time crew, which takes years. You don't. It's like being here. You don't get to start out as a JTAC right away. You got to do your time as your regular scout observer and work your way up. And the pay is not where I wanted it to be.
Yeah. I heard I've heard that the pay's kind of garbage until you're in fire season and you're working constantly, and then that's when you kind of get your payment out of it. Man, I remember being a kid. When I was a little kid, I used to. I don't know how I heard about it. I remember seeing the hot shots or the smoke jumpers, and I was like, man, that'd be such a cool job. Parachute into the fire and put it out with a shovel, And then as an adult, I'm like, I mean, it sounds cool, but I don't know. Yeah. I don't know how cool that would be.
That's the equivalent of watching the Navy SEAL commercials where they pop up out of the water and go onto the beach, and you're like, that's so cool. Until you do a boat raid, and you're like, dude, I'm soaking wet. I'm chafing. All my gear is like 10 pounds heavier now, and I'm covered in sand. This sucks.
Yeah, he's been pissing in his wetsuit. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, all that's happening. Have you guys seen that documentary or that docu-series, I guess you would call it, Fire Chasers on Netflix?
Yes.
Not.
It's pretty good. I mean, if it's I was just looking at it a second ago. I think it's the same one I saw, but it follows obviously CAL FIRE, and it talks extensively about their inmate population that goes out and does firefighting.
Yeah.
And one thing I do want to say, because I've watched Joe Rogan quite a bit, and he's talked about it a few times, and they bring it up like on his show, like the firefighters that are doing it are being forced to go out and fight fires or something like that. And it's actually it seems like a really good program where it's volunteer only, obviously, and they have to earn their spot. And it seems like most of the people want to, get on it because they're low level criminals, and it gets them outdoors, like you were talking about, Levi, getting outside and working. But it seems like an interesting way to maximize the use of this like population that needs some kind of skills. And in a place like California that burns up every year, and they always need firefighters in California, during the fire season, it seems like a really good way to supplement the fire department. Is there any kind of program like that in either Ohio or Oklahoma? And what do you think about that program overall? We'll start with you, Q.
Nothing like that here in Ohio. However, I like that program. I think it's really cool. Again, as long as it's voluntary, as long as the people are being treated appropriately, and as long as they can get their certifications so that they can work once they're cleared. Because I mean, me personally, this is the best job I've ever had. I say that unreservedly. Like, I enjoyed being a Marine. I love, having the title of Marine, and I made a lot of good friends in the Marine Corps and had some great times in the Marine Corps. But this job is awesome. Like, it's super fulfilling for me personally. I'm helping people every day. And I mean, everybody loves firemen.
That's like, I tell people, you think about police officers and firemen and stuff like that, but firefighters are like the most selfless. It's one of the most selfless jobs you could have. People don't like police officers because they're detaining other, people, sure. And that's obviously, they're doing a lot of heroic stuff all the time. But the only time you ever really hear about police officers is when they're fucking something up and then everyone gets mad at them. Sure. Firefighters, on the other hand, are just going out to save people, like. The biggest issue I think people probably have with firefighters is if they go a little, they're a little overzealous with their application of water and flood out a whole house over something that maybe didn't need it. But
sure.
I think.
Do you guys have anything like that in Oklahoma?
No. Again, 70% of the firefighters in America are volunteer, and it's mostly because of rural areas. Because Oklahoma is a very rural place. We have a lot of volunteer departments, and it's kind of Each department's a little different, but most departments kind of have the standard of you can't have been a felon, you can't have had a DUI in order to be on the department. And a lot of the DUI thing is kind of iffy department wise because obviously if you were 21 years old and did something stupid one time in your life and now you're 38 years old, and you can't hold it against people. Where that comes in is insurance, because if you crash a fire truck, if you're running lights and sirens somewhere and you get into an accident, it doesn't matter whose fault it is, it's your fault, is really what it comes down to. Yeah, well, because you're the professional driver, you're trained, you're the one who is more than likely violating the traffic laws by going maybe a little fast or rolling through a stop sign, etc. But more importantly, you've been trained on how to drive like that, hopefully. So you're supposed to be before you get behind the wheel, let's put it that way. But again, we don't so much have.
Is it like the military? Is it like the military where like the junior guy drives normally?
No. So we'll talk paid department and volunteer department. Starting with volunteer department, it's kind of whoever gets there first and has passed the emergency vehicle driver's course gets to drive. Out here, I drive about 50% of the time. If I make a call with the volunteer department, unless it's somewhere where if I show up and one of the guys on the volunteer department out here who's actually a Lawton firefighter, paid municipal department firefighter, he grew up out here. So when they're like, oh, it's at this address, he'll be like, oh, that's Joe Bob Smith's place. I know where we're going. I know where the gate is to get into his field. Well, then he's going to drive because I don't have a clue who Joe Bob Smith is.
Yeah, it just makes more sense.
Right. And he knows the roads out here. He knows where the load rated bridges and stuff are, and I don't. But at that point, it's just kind of if like the last structure fire I went on with him, I drove because he was doing officer stuff in the passenger seat, getting other resources. He's on the radio getting other resources out there, kind of like the VC thing, the vehicle commander deal. In the paid department, the junior guy rides tailboard. You're in the back. For our department, if you don't have any certifications at all and you're brand new, the only seat you're qualified to ride in is what we call the plug man, and you're the guy who's catching the hydrant with the hose, and then you're basically handing tools to the firefighters that are going inside. After that,
okay.
And so for me, I can ride any of the seats in the back of the fire truck. So I can be on the nozzle, I can be catching the plug. It doesn't really matter. The guy in the front right seat, he's the crew chief. He's in charge. It's his vehicle. It's his crew. He makes the calls. He's an officer. So for us, it's captains that ride, captains or higher that ride in the passenger seat, and the driver is usually the senior firefighter with all of his driver certifications. And that's just kind of how we do it for emergency response. Now, when we're like, hey, we have to run over to this building to go get our ladders tested or whatever, we'll take a junior guy who's trying to get his driver certifications and put him in the driver's seat and let him get some time behind the wheel.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What about you? What about on the Cleveland side there, Q?
So for us, it's a little bit different. So I'll start off with my smaller departments and I'll move up to Cleveland. So with Copley, they have 2 stations. So everybody kind of needs to know how to drive. Everybody who gets hired on has either gone through or within their probationary period will go through EVOC, emergency vehicle operators course, and they will be certified and know how to drive. Now that doesn't mean you always get to drive. So for Copley, they're kind of this mashup between a full-time staff department supplemented by part-time staff. So I'm part-time there. So most of the time, the full-time guys will drive if we catch a working fire. For medical runs, I drive the ambulance and for one run, and then the next guy will drive, then the next guy will drive. So it's really kind of dependent there. Medina, they have about 6 stations, and they staff 2 during the weekdays. So for nights and weekends, we get paged out if there's a fire. So again, very similar to Levi's situation, we function in a volunteer role. You'll see, generally speaking, whoever gets there first will drive, because I mean we all live in the city, or we're within 5 miles of the station we're responding to. So, however, if like for my station in Medina, there's like 2 guys that are very familiar with the area as opposed to my familiarity with it. So most of the time, one of those guys is always driving. However, there have been times where I drive, or, if we drive the ladder truck, there's not too many guys that are real comfortable with driving the ladder truck. So I usually end up driving the ladder truck, which is fine because I drove the ladder truck a lot in Cleveland.
Is the ladder truck, is that like, when you say ladder truck, is that like the really long one that has like the dude in the back as well? Okay.
So that's a little bit different. So you have a couple different types of vehicles. Usually the 2 most common types that people see is either the engine or the ladder. Sometimes the engine is called the pumper. But the engine or pumper is the vehicle that is, generally speaking, responsible for putting the wet stuff on the hot stuff. That's their role. They're extending hose and running hose line and putting out the fire. Those are the main guys for that. Your truck companies, that's the first company I started out with Cleveland Fire. It's a longer vehicle that has a ladder on the top. It has an aerial ladder, whether that be just a big long ladder or whether it be a ladder with a bucket on the edge, on the end of it. Those are called towers. Now the one you're talking about, where the kind of you got the driver cab and then you have the ladder and it pivots there in the middle between the cab and the ladder, that's called a tiller. So those you'll have a guy in the back, steering the rear end of the tiller. We don't have any tillers anymore, just because we have a lot of narrow streets and they really kind of assessed the situation. Or like, oh, you guys don't need tillers anymore, so they took them. So that's a long story short. But
there you go.
like FDNY, they still have tillers. Other departments, they still have tillers. Rural departments sometimes still have tillers.
Well, and Q, if I can throw something in there, the purpose of a tiller is because when you have a truck that's 60 feet long, it's hard to make those turns down the narrow alley. Sure. And so being able to have the tillers, like FDNY uses a lot because they have those narrow streets where you just can't make a turn in something that's twice as long as a school bus without having some sort of articulation in the middle. And so that's what the tiller's for. The guy in the back controls the rear wheels, and it just allows them. I mean, you can watch these guys. They can drive a circle through 4 separate alleyways around a building with building on the other side. So that's the point of a tiller. But a lot of places don't have that just because they don't have the high building density and narrow streets that require it.
They have one out here in Oceanside. Yeah, it looks like my video froze, but oh well. They had one out here in Oceanside, and like 2 months ago, I think a pickup truck T-boned it as it was going through an intersection. And I was like, oh, that has got to be an expensive mistake to run into one of those. I think it actually hit it and flipped it over on its side, like the back portion of the fire. I could be wrong on that, but
wow, he had to be moving to do that.
Yeah.
How often do you guys? How often is like a do you see like a fire truck or an ambulance or something like that get involved into an accident because they're on their way to an emergency and someone's not hearing the siren or something like that and hits them, or they whatever.
So here in rural Oklahoma, it's a little bit different. Lawton is a relatively dense place. We've only had one accident in the last 5 years since I've been out here, and it was an ambulance that was going through an intersection. But the big thing is we're so the law says you're supposed to slow down and move to the right for emergency vehicles. However, the law also says that as the emergency vehicle driver, we call them your lights and sirens aren't the I'm demanding you give me the right of way. We call them excuse me lights. It's your, hey man, I'm gonna try and sneak past you real quick, but you're still, if you blow through if you have the red light at the intersection, you go through the red light, lights and sirens and all, and hit somebody who has the green light, you're at fault because they had the right of way. Again, it comes back to that EVOC course with Now if you have the green light and somebody runs a red light and hits you, okay, it's just like anything else. But the issue we have, and I'm sure Q can talk to this quite a bit, is you'll be coming up and it's rush hour traffic time. Everybody's trying to go home, and there's 4 or 5 cars lined up at the red light waiting to go, and you come up behind them. One of our things, we just go ahead and turn our lights and sirens off and just wait in traffic with them, because the last thing we need, people want to move out of your way, so they'll just go through the red light, and now you're risking them getting into an accident, which will be their fault for running a red light to get out of your way. So, like especially the ambulances in Lawton, if we come with that red light, we'll just kill the light. If there's no way we can get around the traffic there, like going into the oncoming lane or going through the turn lane to go around them to go straight or whatever, we just turn the lights and sirens off. And once the light turns green, we'll flip them back on, and then everybody can get out of our way.
I've actually, whenever I see a police car or like a fire truck like that that's like going and then they shut their lights off, I'm like, are they just trying to get through traffic and they just, like they just did that to get through traffic? Or I'm like, did whatever the call was just canceled? Because I know that's what a lot of people think. They'll see, because I've actually seen a cop car come up to an intersection, flip his lights long enough to get through the intersection, and then just keep going. And I'm like, dude, did you just run that light? Did you just like use your lights to run that red light, or were you on an actual call?
Yeah, but we don't do that in the fire department.
If you guys want to throw some shade at the police, feel free, because like 3 episodes ago I had Ashley. I'm pulling it up right now. I had a police officer come on. He used to work for a department out here in California. He got out he retired as a detective, Deputy Sheriff 2. Ashley Smitnick. That's episode 41. And I know it's funny. There's always a rivalry between the police and fire departments about who secures the area, who's in the most danger, who's doing the most work. It's funny. It's a good friendly rivalry.
So, yeah, like I said, like Levi said, I cannot speak to what the police department does, or sheriffs or highway patrol, whatever. Although I will say highway patrol out here, they're definitely the most professional, but sometimes I'm like, man, you guys got your hats on too tight, man, because like they don't let anything slide. But
oh, really?
Oh yeah, it
is possible to get a ticket in a fire truck.
Absolutely,
it 100% is.
Do you know anybody that's gotten one?
Yes.
Not personally, I don't. But so kind of doubling back on the Levi's thing. So Cleveland, we at 27 stations. So at any given time, whether you're the new guy on the street or whether you're the senior man, you may be driving. It's just, you'll have to see what the deal is for that day. Usually the senior man likes to drive, but it really depends. Like sometimes everybody else on your shift is off and you got to drive today. Whereas in like, I know Detroit and I'm pretty sure New York, like they have dedicated chauffeurs. Like that's what their position is. You're the chauffeur and the pump operator. You have to test to get that position to drive, and that's what you do. But so like for us, when, rush hour traffic or something like that, we know we can't get around, we'll leave our lights on so that, the people know that, hey, we do need to get by when this is green light, but like we'll turn our sirens off and we won't honk or anything like that. Cause again, like you said, you don't want to force somebody into an intersection to have them get hit by a car. Same general speaking rules apply for us. When we have our lights and sirens on and we're responding to an emergency, by the letter of the law, we're allowed to exceed the speed limit by 10 miles an hour. That's it.
Okay.
So, even if you're going through a green light and, you hit somebody, they're going to try and determine whether you are going faster than what you should have been. And what that's called is showing due regard for public safety. So if you aren't showing due regard, then you're going to get hammered. Like that's it. They're not going to save you. However, if you're following all the rules and doing what you're supposed to, then you'll be protected. But even for us, like even when we're running lights and sirens, we're still very, very careful, even coming up to green lights, because pulling out of the station, going through green lights. I've been on my way to a fire lights, sirens, the Q alarm, which is that cat sounding, that
Wind up.
Yeah.
swinging the cat, we call it.
It's the one that causes my neighbor's dog to start barking.
Yeah. So, all three of those, plus I'm honking as I come up to the intersection and as I go through. I've still had people blow through the intersection and cut me off. Like, it's the craziest thing in the world.
You would be surprised how many people don't care that you are on the way to an emergency.
Oh, they don't care.
You'd be surprised at, I mean, I know, skid mark and me, we see it every day, but you would really, the average person would be surprised how many people just don't care that there's a fire truck or an ambulance behind them and won't pull over for you, won't let you around them.
How
they just, not my emergency, not my problem.
The general person is an asshole anyway, or the average person is just an asshole anyway. So, I mean, I don't know how surprised I'd actually be, because I've realized how much people, like the little regard that people give for anybody else, especially right now when this whole like COVID thing's going on. You see how people go to the stores and buy up like an entire shelf of one item and basically saying fuck you to everybody else. That's just kind of how people are. But I did want to ask you guys, how has this whole coronavirus thing kind of has it changed the way that you guys are operating when you go to a call, especially like an emergency, like a medical call, compared to what you were doing like maybe in December? We'll start with you, Q, because I know you're municipal and you're probably.
So for us, it was a very rapidly evolving situation. As far as things went. So before Governor DeWine shut down everything, when Corona was first kind of being talked about on the table, and they were saying, "Oh, this is infectious and it's really spreading," they were saying, "Okay, so the fire department will not respond to any suspected COVID cases." That was the first thing to come down the pipe, and then. It was just like, so when we get dispatched for a call, we have our little red phones in the station that ring, and that's the dispatcher calling us, and they tell us, how old the person is, the gender, and the nature of the emergency, and any special instructions. So usually it'll be something, and just like as an example, it would be like, hey, engine 20, you have a 65-year-old male, short of breath, at 1234 Main Street. Med 20 will be, coming with you. Okay, cool. And that's all the information you get sometimes. Well, most of the time, that's all the information you get. So, you show up, and all I know is that it's short of breath. Now, in the boss, who rides shotgun, will have a little computer that may give him some more details about the call, but most of the time it doesn't. So he may say, "Oh, the person's been coughing or whatever," and like, "Oh, okay, cool." So you go in with your med bags, not knowing what to expect, and that's when you start your real big time serious information gathering from the patient. And, sometimes patients will lie to you. Sometimes they just aren't good historians, and they don't know that they don't have a good time frame of, what's been going on with them. Or sometimes they've had these symptoms for a long time, and now they're calling you at 2 a.m. So you really never know what you're walking into. That headache could be a full-on stroke, and this person's dying, So at first they were like, okay, fire department's not going to respond to any suspected COVID cases. So we're like, okay, well, then we found that we were going on all these shorter breath calls that seemed like they might be COVID. So then they were like, okay, well, that's unsustainable. So just wear, a surgical mask when you go in. And then like a week later, it was like, okay, now you need to wear a surgical mask and glasses. Okay, so on every call, you're going to wear a surgical mask and glasses. And then on suspected COVID cases, you're going to wear the safety goggles and the N95 breathing mask. Okay, if it's a confirmed case, then you're going to wear, your SCBA and, goggles. Well, not goggles because you have a face mask on, but you'll wear, the whole suit. And it's just like,
a fire suit or like a hazmat suit?
So you would wear it's not quite a hazmat suit. Like technically speaking, it is, but it's like a
Are you
lower
talking
level
about the
of
level
hazmat
B
suit.
Tyvek suits?
Yeah, well, it's that kind of cloth thing. You know what I'm talking about?
Basically,
It
you're showing up in mop gear that just basically
is
stops
more
bodily fluids
breathable,
from
right?
coming through. Is
Mhm.
what he's talking about.
So
Okay.
it rapidly changed for us, and then there are some situations where like people will come up and ring the department doorbell or knock on our door like, hey, I have so and so is having a problem here, you know. So now the departments generally stay all sealed up, and if somebody's got something going on, we have to talk to them through the glass. Like we don't open the door unless it's an actual emergency for that person. So that's really what's changed for us. But I mean, other than that, I mean, we're still going on calls, but
How
it's
many
masked up now.
how many confirmed COVID cases have you had to deal with?
Um, let's see. Actual confirmed, I think I've had one actually. We shut down pretty quickly. The state of Ohio shut
Yeah.
down pretty quickly um, once we had some cases, but there's been a lot of scares. Like so, when it first went down, we actually responded to a call. It was, without violating too much HIPAA here, we responded to a 70-something-year-old male. 2 days ago, the call came in as short of breath. 72-year-old male, short of breath. So we go to the call, and then we find out once we get there, like his daughter-in-law is outside, and she gives us all the information. She's like, oh, he works at a building with a person who is exposed or who tested positive for COVID at the time he was
Hmm.
working. 2 days ago, he was normal, and now he's bedridden, barely responds to verbal stimulus. Um, he's super hot, and he's been coughing a lot. So we're just like, oh, this dude has COVID. Like, no question about it. Generally speaking, obviously we're not doctors and we couldn't test him on the spot, but we're like, I mean, he has almost all the symptoms. So
Hmm.
then we actually had to call the CDC, and the CDC was telling us exactly how to handle it. And it was this big cluster like early on. And, shortly thereafter, like I said, Governor DeWine shut everything down. But, we've had a couple cases like that where this person meets, generally speaking, all the wickets for suspected corona, and then we take them to the hospital, they go get tested, and they're like, oh, well, it's not corona, it's just double pneumonia, which double pneumonia is horrible as well, but, at least it's not
Yeah.
corona. So,
Yeah. What about you, Levi? Have you like you said before, you're on base and your demographic there is definitely younger and healthier, and this is obviously a disease or a virus that's affecting the older population. I think almost everybody they're saying is dying is over the age of 70 and like overweight. So you probably haven't experienced it as much, but what kind of changes have you seen at your department on the federal level?
So being federal, the tail is wagging the dog for us. we because Fort Sill does have rotational units, we have a lot of buildings that are on quarantine status because they were in South Korea, they were in Germany, they were in Italy, they were
Mm.
Spain, wherever the unit happened to be, and they come back from a deployment and they're automatically quarantined for 14 days because they might have it. Also, the only VA clinic within 100 miles is on Fort Sill. So we, all those old and not in the best shape people are there. And one thing that's kind of a little bit of an understatement, like Quentin was talking about, that shortness of breath call, man, if I had a nickel for every time somebody had shortness of breath, whether they're young or old or whatever, that's what it is. I mean, we get soldiers shortness of breath. Well, what were you doing? Well, we were
I was
doing
running.
we were doing the Murph, and I
Yeah.
couldn't breathe. I'm like, well, did you ever think it's maybe because you're running a Murph? Like, a mile run, 100 pull-ups, 200 squats, 300, or whatever. I'm like, dude, yeah, or have someone's having a panic attack. But the where we run into the issue, it's hard for us is that we know our demographic. However, family comes to visit the people that live in in base housing, and so
Mm-hmm.
grandma and grandpa came to, spend their grandson's third birthday at Fort Sill, and where did they come from? And again, because we're federal, we've had, I think we've only had maybe 10 cases actual confirmed of COVID on Fort Sill, and they were all, hey, I've been out of the country in places where it was much higher and came back. So the quarantine process is a little bit easier because we have a more controlled demographic. But for us, yeah, we definitely have taken extreme precautions with stuff. We've kind of altered how we run on calls now. Instead of the closest, unless it's an actual life threat. If somebody is needing CPR or it's a legitimate life and death situation, we only have one truck that'll run on base because Fort Sill's not that big. That'll run to those medical calls and kind of help the ambulance, be there to help the ambulance out. But we mostly just let the Fort Sill ambulance handle it unless it's a legitimate life threat. If it's somebody who says, man, I just don't feel good, I think I might be sick, and they call 911, hey man, ambulance, that's you. But if somebody calls and we have a situation where, like, a while back we had a guy who was like, my wife stopped breathing, I'm doing CPR on her right now, I need help, then we will absolutely run to that. But we're running in hazmat suits, not the level A, again, not the Monsters Inc. suits, but they're called Tyvek suits. And imagine like a really, really hefty 55-gallon trash bag turned into a bodysuit.
Okay.
And then, so we'll wear that with, the gloves and stuff to go over it. And then we have decon kits where we basically spray ourselves down with a Lysol solution. And we get our trucks sprayed out 3 times a week. There's people that get paid to spray this stinky, it's like a citrus with a hint of throw up smell, stuff inside of our fire trucks.
Sounds wonderful.
Oh yeah, no, it's awful. And then you wait, 10 minutes for it to dry and get in, and the inside of the truck stinks for the next half hour. But, yeah, it's kind of altered in that aspect for us, just because we're, the government's trying to get a handle on this thing. But where we really see the impact is not so much on the fire service. It's in our community that we have. We had a lady in housing. She had a pipe or something burst in her. For whatever reason, government contractors, they put the laundry rooms upstairs in these 2-story duplexes. And
okay.
Yeah, so
makes sense.
Yeah, right. So every now and then a pipe will burst or the washing machine will fail catastrophically, and the water will be pouring out in the 2nd story. Well, nobody knows that because it's just a couple of bedrooms, and they're downstairs, watching TV, and all of a sudden there's water pouring through the floor into the ceiling of the downstairs, and it sets their smoke alarm off. And that's tied, and their smoke detectors are tied into the system. So anytime they go off at a residence, if more than one activates, then it alerts the fire department. So we show up down there, and this poor lady's got 3 inches of standing water downstairs, and we're trying to help. And she just moved into the house, and we're trying to help, clean up the water. It's not really our job, but we are public servants. We don't always get to fight fire. Sometimes we get to do the not as fun stuff. And she was talking about how they were saying they're gonna have to put her in a hotel while they renovate the house. And she's like, yeah, my husband comes back from wherever he was on Friday, which was, this is like a Wednesday. And she goes, and he's supposed to be quarantined at home. What's going to happen? Like, well, he's going to be quarantined for 2 weeks in the barracks. So it's just kind of a bummer for her because that's 2 weeks longer that her and her daughter don't get to see the husband and dad because they're going to be in a hotel out in town, and and he's going to be stuck in the barracks. So.
Have either one of you guys experienced any kind of equipment shortage because of this? I know the N95 mask were like, all that was happening.
We cannot get N95s to save our life, man. Yeah. We've got all the stuff we had, and it's one of those like, hey, use this if you need it, but let's not use it just to use it. Believe it or not, the federal government's having trouble getting a hold of some of this stuff too.
So the reason I laughed is because I just reposted one of our union members posted a thing on how Cleveland Fire Department's actually using expired N95 masks and how the bands don't hold up and whatnot. So yeah, absolutely, we're experiencing equipment shortage.
What does that mean though? What does that mean when a mask is expired?
So basically, the mask itself is not necessarily expired, but it's the the bands that hold the mask onto your face. So it's just, I mean, essentially just think about a rubber band strapping to the back of your head. And this, what happens to an old rubber band that's been worn out and used, it doesn't have elasticity anymore. So the thing doesn't stay tight to your face. So the particulates can get in essentially past your mask. So, that's a big concern there.
I think it's really, it's a weird one. So one, here in California, I'm in San Diego. If I go out right now, if I go to the grocery store, about 80% of the people are wearing some sort of mask.
Sure.
Anywhere from a homemade cloth mask to like an N95 mask. I know, as well as I'm sure you know, the cloth mask is giving you about 5% protection from spreading a virus to anybody. It's basically nothing. Like, you're not getting anything from that. And I think it's kind of some places, my buddy Michael Farrell, who's been on the show a few times, he was saying he's a plumber, so he's a service plumber, so he's out doing calls all day. They're still working and everything. Right. And he said he went to this Mexican place to get a burrito or something for lunch, and he didn't have a mask, and they wouldn't serve him. They kicked him out. They actually kicked him out of the place for not having a mask, even though it's not a requirement.
Sure.
And it, like, to me, that seems so like ridiculous and crazy because one, even if I wanted to get an N95 mask, that's what you need, or surgical mask, which is your next best thing, neither one of them are available. Like, those are only, even like you guys, emergency services and hospitals and stuff are having a hard time getting it. And two, it's like, if I put on this stupid cloth mask, or like the Marine Corps is making their dudes wear neck gaiters over their face, that's doing nothing except for make you look like an idiot,
Right.
I think the only benefit it really provides, because Fort Sill implemented a thing, if you are going to go inside the shopettes, the PX, the commissary, you have to have a mask on. So we had to go in the commissary the other day, and we're all wearing stupid cloth masks. And again, my opinion only, I think it's completely asinine, and it's just one of those, well, at least we're doing something. The only thing I can really see that it helps out with is there's a lot of people that don't feel the need to, cover their mouth when they cough or sneeze. At least
those are the worst
happening. But
all right.
Don't you think that's
a lot of hand?
Don't you think that the requirement that some places are saying for people to wear a mask like that is also causing or extending the shortage of masks that we have? Because now, okay, well, I'm going to go to the grocery store, I'm going to wear my mask, and you're not supposed to reuse them. So, like, what am I going to do? Every time I go out of the house, I'm going to get a new mask? Like, it's just...
Yeah, like, once we use ours, we have to we have paper bags that we literally just, okay, you get off of the call. Unless it was highly suspected that it was corona, then once you get back in the rig, you take your mask off and you put it in this bag and you let it dry out, and that's supposed to kill everything or whatever. Or, you have a solution that you can aerosolize and spray on it that will kill, whatever bacteria. But yeah, I think part of that, kind of contributes. But at the same time, sometimes the best medicine you can give someone is reassurance. Really. Yeah. I mean, like, so in some of these cases, they're reassuring people and they're making people feel better about the whole situation. Hey, I'm all for it, man. If you need that to make you feel better, fine, dude. Like, if you want to rub yourself down with barbecue sauce and that makes you feel better, do it. Like, fine. But at least it has made people a little bit more conscious about, like, coughing and spreading germs, so that's a plus. I mean, just kind of.
I definitely think about what I'm touching more. Like, sure. I'm like, oh shit, I just touched my face again. Oh shit,
as far as this coughing thing goes, like you said, nobody covers their mouth. And a quick story about that. Not last Christmas, but the Christmas before that, I got walking pneumonia from a patient, basically. And what happened was she was sick, had fever, shortness of breath is the call we got at 2 a.m. So not only are we getting up in the middle of the night, but we're going to this patient. So I'm down there taking vitals. I'm listening to her lung sounds, and she coughs directly in my face, like the full splatter of the particulate that she ejected hit me square on the side of my face. let me tell you something. I am not for violence against women, and I'm not for violence against anybody. But I have never wanted to backhand somebody so badly in my life. And again, I understand she's sick. I understand she's not feeling well. She's got a fever, whatever. But are you serious? Like,
This goes back to people are assholes in general, and they don't care about anybody else. It's like these people you see go into the grocery store and cough on stuff. It's like, dude,
terrible. And I got
ridiculous.
so sick for Christmas, and I just happened to, luckily my shift, I was off for that time period, but I was just like, are you effing kidding me? And like all the guys, like I turned around and the boss and the two other firefighters are just kind of looking at me and they're like, ooh,
ooh, you're a zombie now.
Right.
He's infected.
Q, it's funny. I just want to throw this out there. We talk about, having to be the bigger man and people just are stupid. Well, again, we run to the barracks a lot for whatever reason. Somebody thought it was a good idea to put kitchenettes in all the barracks rooms for these kids, and none of them know how to cook.
Out there.
Well, none of them know how to cook, man. It's awful. So, and because it's the barracks, when they set their smoke alarm off, it's not just a quick silence. It's the panel goes off and alerts dispatch. So we make a full response because basically the panel says, hey, we detected conditions are right that there could be a fire in the building. So here we come screaming up, getting fully dressed. And this is never at, 4:30, 5 o'clock at night. It's, 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning that this kid is super drunk, decides he wants to cook or vape in his room. But we have this, our frequent flyer building run to, and we go into that. And usually what happens is all the kids are standing outside and we'll be like, hey, whose room was it? As the chiefs go into the panel to see what it says. Somebody will be like, it was me. I was trying to cook some bacon and it got too smoky. Because one of these buildings it's the Warrior Transition Unit, and it was an old barracks building that they had for the guys coming back from Iraq that needed to be like, hey, here's your week-long cool down before we send you home on leave. So it's like suicide proof. None of the windows open. It's like a Vegas hotel. So these kids will smoke up the room and they can't do anything about it because they can't open a window. They can't ventilate the room anyway. But anyway, we go to this one and we're like, whose room is it? They're like, oh, it's, room 310. We're like, okay, well, where's 310's occupant? Come let me in your room so I don't have to go back to the truck and get my key. And like, well, I think he left. What do you mean he left? So anyway, yeah, I'm tired. This is the third time running the building that night. We go up there and this kid comes up with us and he's like, oh yeah, that's my room. And he's clearly he's drunk as a skunk. And he opens the door and it smells like an ashtray. He'd clearly been smoking in his room. And I asked him, I was like, hey man, you been smoking in your room? He goes, no. I was like, well, what were you doing? He goes, well, I was asleep. And I said, okay, well, why does it smell like cigarette smoke in your room? Your room set the smoke detector off. What happened? He goes, maybe the shower was too steamy, which is a legit thing. They're very sensitive heads. And if they take a really steamy shower and pop the door open too quick, it will set the smoke detector off. And I was like, well, I thought you were sleeping. And the shower had been running, but the bathroom just reeked of cigarettes. So he was smoking in his bathroom, hoping that running the shower and the fan
cover it up.
Yeah, this kid's really drunk, and it was me and a guy who's junior to me were upstairs, and my boss was down at the panel downstairs. So we're on the third deck in this kid's room, and my partner's got the door propped open, and this kid's like, he's like, I don't know what happened. I said, look, dude, just stop lying to me. You and I both know you were smoking in this room. Don't do it again, because if you do, we'll call the MPs. They will show up. They will take you to the brig, and then in the morning, your command can get you out. And he just sits there and he bows up to me. He's like, "Well, I don't want to have to do that." And dude, he puffed his chest out and stepped towards me, and I pushed him backwards. And I looked at my buddy. I was like, "Close the door." And this kid's eyes were just huge. I was ready to throttle this kid. My partner's like, I was like, "Close the door." He closed the door, and I was like poking this guy in the chest. I'm like, listen, dude, it's 3 a.m. You're the reason we're here. I was like, you are not going to talk to me like that. And he's, oh, I'm sorry, man. So I was like, you know what? Here's the deal. If we come back to this building again tonight, I don't care if it's you that set it off or it's someone else. If we come back to this building tonight, I will call the MPs, and I'm just going to get you arrested so I don't have to deal with this. And
yeah.
But like I was about 5 seconds away from hitting this kid, and that's not the right thing, and I'm glad I had enough self-control to not do it, but dude, it gets really old dealing with people like that in the middle of the night.
I was gonna say, I can't imagine, like, both of you probably have like your regular, there's a place you always end up going, and the people you always end up dealing with, your regular customers, if you want to call them anything. But I don't know, man. Like I said, like I keep saying, the general public for the most part only cares about themselves, and they're kind of assholes, and I wouldn't want to deal with them on a daily basis. So shout out to both of you guys for doing that. We are at almost 2.5 hours. So which is crazy. This feels like it doesn't even feel like it went that long at all.
Right.
Is there anything you guys want to talk about before we end it, or?
Yeah, one thing, him and I we had a conversation on the phone this morning. I got off work and I called him. One thing that is interesting that I think that your audience might enjoy hearing is him and I, we basically just talked about how much this job, the fire service, has kind of opened our eyes to leadership, and how, the Marine Corps teaches leadership. We're really good at that. But how little I knew, even as a staff sergeant, how little I actually knew about being a good leader from the Marine Corps to the fire service. And it's one of those things that there's, for anybody who's looking at potentially doing this job, there is so much crossover between the whole, JJ did tie buckle and all that stuff. But you can just really see you don't know what you don't know. And leadership in the Marine Corps and leadership in the fire service, well, there's a lot of similarities. There is a lot of differences. In some ways, the fire service has got I don't say it's better, but it's a different level of leadership. And I was telling Q about one of the station chiefs I have. He's not my favorite person. He's like the senior guy in the department. His comp date, which is they take when you started federal service and add all your military time in, and that date is your comp date for your retirement and stuff. His comp date's in like 1989. So okay. He's been there for forever, and he is. Yeah. I mean, he's got a short fuse. Sometimes he's really awesome. Sometimes he'll throw a fit about something, and you just kind of, I'm just going to go into the bay and look at the fire truck for a little while until you calm down. But even still, with things like that, you get, he's the kind of guy that he can be a jerk, but he's smart and knows what he's doing. And like, where I don't like working with him, to be honest, I really don't. But I got a lot of respect for the guy because being on fire scenes, being in a vehicle accident, I mean, he's a consummate professional in that aspect. It's just all the daily life stuff that he's kind of rooted. But one of the things that I thought was cool, that I thought is very Mattis-esque of him, if you will, that, it was awesome, was Christmas Day. I was, this last year, I worked the 23rd and 24th, and I got off work on the 25th. And normally shift change goes at 8 o'clock. Most guys show up around 7:30, 7:45 to relieve you. This guy, I was 6:15. I'm sitting there mopping the floor of the station. I'm the only one awake. And he walks in the door and he's like, "Hey, dude, give me the mop." Hand him the mop. He's all right, go home. Merry Christmas. And you got the station captain relieving the lowest guy on the totem pole at that station to go home and have Christmas with his family. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, there's so much. I don't know. That's a whole nother topic on itself. But Q, I don't know if you had anything you want to add to that. But being on the fire department has really opened my eyes to leadership traits and stuff that I knew about, but it's just different than what you expect in the Marine Corps. It's a really cool experience.
Yeah, the application is different. It's funny because this is the second episode in a row that JJ did tie buckle has come up.
Yes.
The last one, Matt Ketting, he was a former, he was in the recon, got out. He runs a business out in Vegas now, the Invictus International. And he's saying that he has that written on his board, like that he looks at every day, and he's like thinks about what he's, which ones he accomplished well that day and which ones he didn't. So it's funny that stuff like that sticks with Marines, like even beyond their service,
Absolutely.
I would definitely echo the same things that Levi said. So I'll leave that for you. I think you said that pretty well. But I guess a piece of advice for, anybody coming out of the Marine Corps and coming into like the fire service or the police department or, the EMS field. Yes, combat prepares you. Yes, the Marine Corps prepares you and the service prepares you for this service, and there are, I mean, it's literally the same, but it's completely different at the same time.
Yeah.
So, if you come in with that ethic of, all right, I know I'm going to be the junior man. I'm just going to bust my ass. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to let my actions speak for me rather than my resume. If you come in like that, you'll be fine and you'll do well. Keep your eyes open, keep your ears open, and absorb and study as much as you can and learn from the guys. Find that grumpy old crusty bastard who's just, I had like one of my first days, I was sitting they invited me to sit down at the kitchen table, and I'm listening to the guys talk about the last shift. And one of the senior guys walked in, and, I didn't know him. This is my first time meeting him. I'm like, stand up. Oh, hey, how you doing? My name's Quentin Brown. He's like, yeah, nice to meet you. Get the fuck out of my chair. And I'm like, what the hell, dude? But I just, take it on the chin and keep on moving. But what you do in combat will somewhat prepare you. What you do in the Marine Corps will somewhat prepare you. And I'll give this example. My first fire, which was, I think, my maybe 6th or 7th shift or something like that, full-on working fire. We had been responding to false alarms all day, and it was like 2 or 3 in the morning. And on every fire call, we get all geared up just in case it's a real thing. So I'm, and in the fire truck, once you're geared up, I'm riding backwards because my tank is on, but it's locked into the seat. So I'm riding backwards, and my senior man just real calmly looks over. He's like, "Hey, fire's on your side." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Fire's on your side." I'm like, "Okay." And it's 2 or 3 in the morning, so it's pitch black. I look over, and I mean, just this orange glow from down the street, and I'm like, "Oh,"
Here we go.
It starts racing, and you're like, "Oh my God, we're doing it!" And we get up there, and literally the whole side of this 2.5-story home is engulfed in flames. And he's like, "All right, kid, you're up. You're going in." And, you're just like in the Marine Corps, your training kicks in and you're hooking and jabbing and doing your thing. But, just keep in mind that sort of thing. Just be willing to do the shit jobs sometimes. Be willing to do the grunt work that's not necessarily glamorous, because you build up credit and rapport with your guys, and they see you work hard. They'll absolutely take care of you. Like when I walked into the fire department, you can feel the experience when you walk into a old firehouse like that with senior guys who know what they're doing, and you listen to them. They may be grumpy, they may be crabby, and they may not want to, see the millennials on the job. But, if you show them you're willing to work hard, show up and do your job, they'll take care of you, they'll teach you, and you'll do some kick-ass things. So
yeah, I think that's awesome advice. I think anybody that gets out and tries to flex their military experience as a way to garner some kind of a respect at their new job is just kind of setting themselves up for failure. Like you said, you need to go in, you're the new guy, so you're going to be doing the new guy shit that nobody likes to do, and you got to earn your spot. The big difference for me, and I think people don't really think about it sometimes, is that firefighters and police officers, they go and train and they learn how to take care of fires, and they learn how to, go through and do these like stuff for like police officers going through and working with criminals and shit like that. But they're actually putting that stuff into practice daily.
Yep.
Whereas the military, you're training and training and training and training, and then maybe a year or 2 into it, okay, hey, now we're going to deploy. Right. And then even if you deploy, you may not get to go do some of the stuff that you trained to do. Whereas it's legitimately like every day police officers are going out and interacting with the public, a lot of times on the worst day that those people have ever had, and the same with you guys. So, I mean, yeah, that's definitely something I think people should realize before they get out and stuff like that, and try to go into any kind of field that involves danger, that involves life and death decisions that are realistic and happening. There was something else I was going to ask you. Oh, on the training piece, who do you think's better? Who's more thorough for your training? Do you think the military was more thorough in training, or do you think that your career in the fire department has been more thorough for the training? Both of you. You can start with. We'll start with Levi.
I think it kind of it's a double-edged sword there. Treading lightly down the blade there. I think.
Yeah, sorry.
I
don't want to get you in trouble.
No worries. No. The military now. With me being a federal firefighter, and the majority of people are actual like veterans. We have very few non-veteran firefighters. There's a lot of that military crossover because everybody was in the military at one point. What I will say is that we drill a lot more in-house at the fire station because we can. If we need to go shoot artillery or drop bombs on aircraft, I mean, you got to schedule the range, you got the aircraft, you got to have the, get everybody down there, get them. There's a lot of moving parts. For us, I mean, we can pull the fire truck out on the apron, which is just the fancy word for the big long driveway. We can pull the fire truck out there and start pulling hose off and connect to a hydrant and spray water, and we can drag hoses around the inside of the bay where we park our fire trucks, and we can practice things like that without ever leaving our house for that 48-hour shift. And then, to go burn, we can take our engine company out of service to go out to the training tower and have somebody cover our area for a couple hours while we're gone. So there is that aspect of it, but there is a lot of it. I don't want to call it the BS training, but the BS training because we are federal, so we have to do our sexual awareness classes and our terrorism awareness and our don't go telling everybody your OPSEC stuff and yeah. I had to go to a customer service class to be able to provide good customer service, and it just all sorts of goofy things like that. A lot of that stuff gets kind of it's like hey Boot, make sure you put my name on the roster. I'll be at the MWR, sleeping in a recliner. So I don't know. I think that the fire service, you get more real, like you were saying. A lot of my training was OJT. It's like, hey, we're rolling up on this giant grass fire. You ever sprayed Class A foam in a wildland setting? No. They're like, well, you're going to do it today. And now they've got me, fighting fire away that I hadn't before or whatever. So there's a lot of real world on the job training that you don't get with the military, but the benefit you get with the military is repetition. And repetition is kind of hard because while we go out to train for fires and stuff, we have a lot of collateral duties and other things that we have to do during the day that we can't just say this week, all we're doing from, Sunday through Friday is we're going to be out training like you can with the military. So it goes both ways, but I think that where I'm at in my career, still relatively new, I'm at a station with a lot of senior guys. So there's a lot of emphasis on, hey, what we've been doing this for 15 years. What does this guy need to know? And it's very beneficial for me.
Yeah.
I think for my side of the town, very similar to Levi, except for, the live burns. The live burns take a little bit more coordination for us, because we have to get the house and then, make sure that it has the right materials in it. Like you can only burn hay and wood of a certain type, So the actual live burns are a little bit more involved. But like I said, I mean, it doesn't cost you anything to pull your apparatus into the back and pull some hose, practice throwing ladders, going through pump operations, running through medical scenarios, doing map tests, running drills, whatever. We can do all that stuff. And like you said, the training we do is almost always on a daily basis applicable, and it seems sometimes that when you train on something, well, then that's the call you're going to get that day. It's just sometimes it works out like that. So, it's good to that aspect, but, sometimes you run into a point where you are doing a little bit of BS training. We have a online program that we have to do a few, like you said, sexual harassment things and customer service. We have a few of those. I don't think any organization government organization you're a part of, you're going to get away from that. It's
you're not
moved to
escaping
that now. Everybody has
Yeah.
their version of Marine Net where they do some sort of online courses, or Marine Online where they're doing some sort of stupid course. However, there are a lot that, are good, but, sometimes, like Levi said, like, hey cadet, here's my username and password. You're going to go in and maybe take a look at this for me and make a study guide sort of thing,
Not that that's ever actually happened. This is
right.
all theoretical,
Just
right?
all theoretical stuff.
Spitballing.
So, but yeah, the training is definitely more applicable. And the great thing is, like, you have senior guys who have, like, okay, hey, here's what happened on this call. I'm going to put you in this scenario, and you run through it, and then he debriefs you. He's like, okay, here's what you did. Here's kind of what I saw that worked on this call. Or, hey, cool, I've never seen it done like that. We've just discovered a new technique that we're going to put into practice. So it can be really, really beneficial.
Nice. Well, hey, I appreciate you guys coming on the show, man. I think you probably didn't expect this to be all fire department stuff, but I think it's going to be really beneficial for anybody that may be interested in the fire service after they get out and stuff like that. And both of you guys have great, backgrounds, and I hope for the people that may not have looked at your episodes before, I hope they go back and listen to your military histories and stuff like that. And again, I'll have you guys on at some other point too, and we'll deep dive into maybe some of your military stuff as well, and then get updates on what's been going on with your first responder jobs now. But thanks for coming on the show. And if you want to throw out your social media or any kind of organizations that you want to, I know Quentin, you guys were running a fundraiser not too long ago. So if there's anything like that you guys want to put out there for the general public, go ahead, and this is your time.
Go ahead, Q. That's all you. I don't have anything. I just got my Facebook page, so that's all you, man.
So first off, I want to thank everybody who supported me for that. It was the Fight for Air climb. Climbed Key Bank Tower, the tallest building in the city of Cleveland. Climbed 58 floors in full turnout gear with an air pack on. It was absolutely miserable, but I'm gonna do it again next year.
What does all that weigh?
So it weighs approximately 50 something odd pounds on top of your weight already. So I'm 265, 6'3", and then an extra 50 or so pounds on top of that. But it's not necessarily the weight that gets you, it's the heat, because that turnout gear keeps heat energy out from getting to your body, so you don't get burned. But it also has a moisture barrier as well, so it traps your sweat, it traps your heat, and
you're nasty by the time you got to the top.
Oh man, you're miserable. Like they threw a bag of ice on the back of my neck, and it was melted within minutes. So
it's basically like doing it in heavier mop gear. It's
yep.
It doesn't breathe at all.
Those boots are bigger, and they're not the most comfortable thing, but it's just hard to move them around. But you get used to it. So yeah, I want to thank everybody for supporting me for that, and be on the lookout for it next year, because I'll be doing it again. And then so one other organization I wanted to throw out is called PAVE, Peer Advisors for Veterans Education. I actually did that program while I was attending the University of Akron and getting my associate's degree. What that is a program of vets who have been in school for a little bit of time, who are veterans at school, and they help new veterans coming in navigate all the pitfalls, and is also just kind of a friend there for you. It's college.
It's like a nice mentor system.
Yeah, kind of, sort of. And we help from everything from your benefits to getting into tutoring to, hey, here's the best way to work your resume, or hey, I have a few contacts over here at this employment center, whatever, But if your school has it, I highly encourage you to not only take advantage of it, but then once you're a veteran in college, I highly encourage you to sign up to help other veterans out, because not only do you get the satisfaction of helping other vets have a leg up, but you get paid, and it's non-taxable.
Oh,
so
nice. That's
nice.
well, we always like that.
Oh yeah. So,
All right, gents. Well, thanks again. Like I said, thanks for coming on. And for everyone that's out there, you can check out my page at jkramergraphics.com and my website, or that's my website. My Instagram page is at jkramergraphics. I actually just hit I'm at 10,000 followers now, which is cool. And on the YouTube page, the new YouTube page, I have over 100 hours of content on there, which is blowing my own mind that I've even done this for this long. So I appreciate you guys. This is the second time both of you guys have been on and taking the time out of your day and your lives to come on and explain some of the stuff to people so that they can understand what the real world is like or like the real military is like, or what being a firefighter is like, outside of what you hear on TV or in the movies and, stuff like that. So I know it's going to be a good benefit for everyone. So yeah. I guess that's it. So everyone have a good day.